So hey, what's up guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. So in this video we are going to see what if Harry Potter was adopted by ancient Egyptian sorcerer. So this is a movie. If you want more movies like this, then please leave a like, share and subscribe. Let's jump right into the video.
The Nile didn't move the way it should have that night. It should have been the same old patient river, black as ink under moonlight, carrying reeds and silt and the soft gossip of insects. It should have breathed south to north like it always had, as steady as a heartbeat. But the water near the ruined sandstone steps of a forgotten quay went still. Not frozen. Listening. Sia felt it first, the way a trained ear feels a lie in a friendly voice. She stood barefoot on warm stone, her robe drawn tight against the desert's late chill, and stared up at the stars. Not at the bright ones tourists would point at, not at the loud constellations that beg for attention, but at the subtle wrongness between them, gaps that didn't belong. "The sky is missing a thread," she murmured. Behind her, the House of Life slept in its layers of wards. Old geometry pressed into the walls, rings of inked protection beneath the floor, names that had been written and rewritten until the stone itself remembered how to refuse harm. It was quiet enough that Sia could hear her own pulse. And then, like a soft knock from very far away, something touched the edge of their sanctuary. Not a person. A story. A story trying to crawl into the world. Sia's fingers tightened around the thin strip of papyrus she'd been reading. The ink on it wasn't ordinary. It wasn't even modern. It was a mixture of soot, crushed lapis, and a single grain of salt taken from a place where no one should have survived. It was the kind of ink you used when you needed the universe to take you seriously. She turned and moved quickly, silent as a shadow, down the corridor toward the inner courtyard. A lamp flared to life before she reached it, flames snapping awake with offended intelligence. Nefert was already there. Nefert never hurried. She simply arrived, like a sentence reaching its period. She was tall and spare, her hair braided in a style that belonged to murals and tombs and stubborn tradition. Her eyes were dark and sharp, and there was always ink beneath her nails, permanent proof that she lived with symbols more than she lived with people. Hori followed her out, broader, older, with hands that looked made for building walls and breaking them. His presence filled doorways. So did his silence. "Say it," Nefert said, as if Sia had been holding words hostage. Sia lifted her gaze. "Something is coming through the river." Hori's brows knit. "Through our river?" "The river doesn't belong to us," Sia said softly. "It belongs to Ma'at." At the name, the courtyard's wards whispered. Not audibly, not like a voice, but like a shape of agreement settling into place. Nefert didn't look at the Nile. She looked at Sia. "What is it?" Sia swallowed. "A child." Hori took one step forward. "That's not a prophecy. That's bait." Sia esse mouth twitched. That was Hori's favorite response to anything cosmic, bait. As if destiny was a fisherman and he refused to bite on principle. "It's not a prophecy," Sia agreed. "It's a rupture. Something ended violently, far away. The ending threw a piece of itself into the world. And the piece is..." Nefert lifted a hand, stopping her. "Don't guess. Read." Sia nodded once, then knelt at the center of the courtyard stone circle. She placed her papyrus strip on the ground and drew a single line of ink across it, speaking a word that wasn't Arabic, wasn't English, wasn't anything a modern throat was supposed to know how to form. The line shimmered. The courtyard's air thickened, as if it remembered how rituals used to smell: dust, resin, and the metallic bite of a storm. Sia pressed her palm to the stone. The Nile responded. Water rose just a little at the far edge of the sanctuary where the river touched their wards. It didn't flood. It didn't lash. It lifted like a hand offering something small and precious. And then the river gave. A bundle drifted into view, riding on a raft of woven reeds that looked too new to be ancient and too ancient to be new. A faint bubble of protection hugged it, trembling as if exhausted. Hori moved first, because Hori always moved first when something fragile appeared. He stepped into the shallow water at the sanctuary's edge, boots sinking into silt, and reached out carefully, as if he was afraid the river would take offense. The reed bundle floated into his arms. He brought it into the courtyard, and as soon as it crossed the final ward line, the bubble collapsed like a sigh. A baby cried, not the thin cry of a child who's merely awake and unhappy. This was the raw, furious cry of a child who had survived something the world didn't have the right to throw at him. Hori held the infant awkwardly for half a second, then adjusted, tucking him closer with surprising gentleness. The baby's face was red and furious. His hair was black and stuck up in a way that looked like an argument. His cheeks were smudged with soot. And on his forehead, bright as a fresh wound, was a lightning-shaped scar. Nefret's eyes narrowed. Sia felt it then, the pulse that came with the scar. Not pain, not quite. More like a door that someone had nailed shut from the inside, and the nails were still hot. English, Hori muttered, like he could taste the place on the child's skin. Not just English, Nefret said. She reached down and touched the air above the baby's scar without making contact. The wards around them flinched. Not in fear. In recognition. As if the House of Life had just seen an old enemy's handwriting on a letter it didn't want. CIS stomachtightened. That's not a simple curse remnant. Nefret's gaze sharpened. No. Hori shifted his grip when the baby's cry wavered. The infant stared up at him, blue-green eyes, too bright for the desert night. Hori stared back like he'd been punched in the chest. He's alive, he said, as if that was new information. Nefret ignored him. She moved to the stone table at the courtyard's center, where a shallow bowl of water sat covered in a linen cloth. She pulled the cloth away, and the water shone faintly, reflecting stars that weren't above them. Bring him, she ordered. Hori hesitated. For the first time since the bundle appeared, he hesitated. If this is a trap. If it is a trap, Nefret said, voice flat as carved stone, then we will see the teeth before we place our hands inside. He brought the baby to the table. The child's cries softened when the bowl came near, as if something in him recognized water as safety. His breath hitched. His tiny fists opened and closed. Nefret took a thin reed pen and dipped it into ink. Not ordinary ink. Sia could smell the resin and iron in it, the kind used for vows and bindings. Nefret spoke one word. The water in the bowl went perfectly still. Then she traced a single small symbol on the air above the baby's scar. The mark for run, the true name thread. The symbol sank into the air like a pebble into deep water. The baby blinked, and suddenly the courtyard felt crowded. Not with bodies, with presences. Sia's throat went dry. Spirits. Hori's hand moved to the knife at his belt, a reflex older than his own life. Nefret didn't flinch. Not spirits, Nefret corrected. Echoes. The bowl's surface rippled, and for a heartbeat Sia saw it. Not the baby's face reflected back, but a flash of green light, a falling house, a woman screaming, a man laughing, a serpent's shadow stretching too long. Then the ripple smoothed. The stars returned. Nefret's face had gone colder. A killing, she said quietly. Hori's jaw set. Whose child is this? Nefret didn't answer immediately. She reached again this time, making contact, placing 2 fingers lightly on the baby's scar. The wards around them hissed. The baby didn't cry. He stared at Nefret with eerie calm, as if he was already used to adults examining the damage done to him. Nefret closed her eyes. Sia watched the tension build in Nefret's throat, in the tiny muscles around her eyes. She was reading something the way a scholar reads a burned page, not for entertainment, but for truth. Then Nefret's eyes snapped open. There's a knot in him, she said. Hori frowned. Explain. Nefret's voice lowered. His soul thread has been pierced and tied to something that does not belong. Sia's fingertips went numb. A possession? A shard, Nefret said. A splinter of another. Hori's expression darkened. A parasite. Nefret's gaze flicked to him. Not exactly. Hori made a disgusted sound. It's in him or it's not. It is, Nefret said, but it is not feeding the way a parasite feeds. It is anchored, like a nail driven into living wood. The baby squirmed, and for a heartbeat the scar glowed, faintly not with light, but with a sensation of pressure, like something behind it wanted to press forward and failed. Si suoglio udard. Who did that to a child? Nefret's fingers lifted. The scar stopped glowing. The baby exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. I don't know yet, Nefret said, but I know this. The knot is foreign. It does not speak the language of this land. It does not obey Ma'at. Hori's voice was rough, then cut it out. Nefret looked at him like he'd suggested smashing a pottery shard that still held name. You cannot cut a knot from a soul with a knife, she said, and you cannot unmake a binding you do not understand without tearing the child apart with it. Hori's shoulders rose and fell once. He wasn't angry at Nefret. He was angry at the world. The baby made a small sound, less a cry now and more a confused hiccup. Hori instinctively bounced him, awkward but earnest. He's cold, he muttered. You shouldn't be out here. Nefret's gaze softened by 1 degree, barely visible, like a statue's shadow shifting. Wrap him, she said, and for once it wasn't an order. It was an instruction that carried the faintest hint of care. Sia moved quickly, pulling a warm cloth from the nearby bench and placing it in Hori's hands. He tucked it around the baby like he'd done it 100 times, even though Sia knew he hadn't. The child quieted, eyes blinking slowly. Nefret turned her attention back to the bowl. The river brought him. Sia hesitated, or someone used the river to hide him in our path. Hori's eyes narrowed. Which is it? Sia glanced at the Nile beyond the courtyard walls. The current felt protective. Nefret nodded slowly. Yes, this child didn't drift into our wards by accident. Hori's lips curled. Then we're being chosen. Sia didn't like the sound of that. Choice by fate usually came with teeth. Nefret pressed the reed pen down onto the stone and spoke a name, not a person's name, but a call, a summons. From the courtyard's shadowed archway, something stirred. It emerged like smoke learning how to stand. Tall, lean, a silhouette shaped like a man, but not quite human, its head angled in a way that made Sia think of jackals and desert nights and graves that didn't stay closed when they were supposed to. An Ockwarden, a guardian spirit bound to the house of life since before any of them were born. It did not speak aloud. It looked, and the look felt like a question. Nefret met its gaze without blinking. Do we reach for this child? She asked. The spirit's presence pressed against the courtyard, and Sia felt the wards respond like dogs hearing their master's whistle. Then the Ockwarden tilted its head toward the river, then back toward the child. A simple answer. No. The House of Life had not stolen. The river had delivered. Hori exhaled through his nose. So what now? Nefret didn't answer immediately. She stared at the baby's scar again, her mind working in silence. Sia could almost see her thoughts arranging themselves like hieroglyphs on a wall. This child was danger. This child was evidence. This child was a living consequence of someone's war. And wars, no matter how far away, always sent ripples into the Nile. Where's his family? Sia asked quietly. Hori's gaze lowered to the baby. Gone, he said, and the word sounded like a stone dropping into a well. Nefret's eyes tightened. We cannot assume. Sia's voice went smaller. His memories show. I saw violence, Nefret cut in. I did not see names. I did not see truth. Hori's mouth hardened. Look at him. Sia did. The baby's face was calmer now, his cheeks still flushed. His eyes wandered the courtyard as if he was trying to memorize it in case it vanished. He looked like a child who'd already learned that places could disappear. Nefret moved around the table, and for the first time she held her hands out toward Hori in a gesture that wasn't ritual. Hori hesitated again, then passed the baby to her. Nefret held him like she was holding a delicate artifact, something sacred and breakable. The baby blinked up at her. Nefret's expression remained controlled, but her grip adjusted slightly more secure, more human. "What is his name?" Sia asked. Nefret looked down at the child. "Do you know your name?" she asked softly, in English that sounded old and careful. The baby made a tiny, gurgling sound and grabbed at the edge of her robe with surprising strength. Hori let out a humorless huff. "That's not an answer." Sia stepped forward. "We can read it. Carefully." Nefret nodded once. She didn't like reading a child's written thread without permission, but she also didn't like leaving a truth unspoken. She dipped her fingers into the bowl and touched a drop of water to the baby's forehead beside the scar, not on it. Then she traced a small symbol against his skin, gentle, temporary, dissolving as quickly as it formed. The baby's eyes fluttered. The air in the courtyard tightened, like a breath held. And Sia heard it not with ears, but with the part of her that listened to the world's underlayers. A name. Harry. Not Egyptian, not Arabic, not a name of the Nile. A name that carried rain and gray skies and stone houses. Nefret's jaw tightened. "Harry," she repeated, tasting the word like unfamiliar spice. Hori looked away, as if the name made the situation more real. "Sia trot icht." He's far from home. Nefret's gaze flicked to the river again. Home was not safe. Hori's voice went grim. "And if whoever did this comes looking?" Nefret lifted her chin. "Then they will find what they deserve." Sia felt a cold flutter in her chest. "Nefret." Nefret's eyes sharpened, but her voice remained controlled. "Listen, this child has been marked by death. He carries a knot of foreign soul. That knot will not remain quiet forever. And if it awakens, if it grows, he becomes a door." Hori's hand tightened. "A door for what?" Nefret's gaze didn't waver. "For the one who made the knot." Silence fell heavy. Even the Nile seemed to pause its breath again. Sia whispered, "So we should send him away." Hori snapped his head toward her. "To where? Back to the people who did this?" Sia flinched. "I didn't say that. I meant—" Nefret interrupted, voice low. "We could attempt to return him to his land quietly. Leave him with a safe household." Hori's eyes went flat. "And how long until the knot calls him back into the war? How long until someone senses him and uses him?" Sia's mind raced. "We could hide him without raising him. Place him under a ward, like a sealed relic." Hori turned fully now, anger in his posture. "He's a child, Sia." Sia cheeks bottomed. I know. I'm trying to keep him alive." Nefret looked down at the baby again. Harry, small and warm in her arms, had fallen asleep in the middle of their debate, like his body had decided it couldn't afford to stay awake any longer. His lashes were dark against his cheeks. His mouth was slightly open. His tiny hand still held a fold of her robe, stubborn even in sleep. Nefret's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. "This is not a relic," she said. Hori's shoulders loosened a fraction. "Good." Nefret continued, voice steady. "But he is not ours to claim either." Sia exhaled shakily. "Then what do we do?" Nefret stared into the bowl of star water again, as if the answer might rise from it. Then she said the only thing that made every ward in the House of Life hum with reluctant approval. "We balance." Hori frowned. "Meaning?" Nefret's gaze lifted, sharp and absolute. "If the river delivered him to us, then the river also delivered responsibility. We do not steal. We do not hide. We do not abandon." Sia's chest tightened. "We raise him." Nefret didn't say yes immediately. She looked at the baby scar again, at the knot that didn't belong. Then she looked at the Nile beyond the walls, at the calm, dark water that had carried him like a secret. And finally she spoke. "We keep him alive," Nefret said. "We keep him balanced. We teach him law before we teach him power. We will not let Isfit take root in him." Hori's voice was rough. And if the knot fights back? Nefrit's eyes hardened. Then we fight it with Ma'at. Sia swallowed. His name is Harry. Nefrit's mouth tightened, as if accepting a name was accepting a future. Then Harry he remains. But here she paused, then added softly, he will also be given a second name. A Nile name. A name that reminds him he was saved by water and law, not by chance. Hori let out a breath that sounded like relief he didn't want to admit he felt. Sia's voice came small. The British will look for him. Nefrit's gaze shifted toward the distant west, as if she could see beyond deserts, beyond seas, beyond countries. Let them look, she said. They will not find him unless Ma'at permits it. The Ak Warden in the shadows shifted once, like a seal being stamped onto a vow. Nefrit turned and carried Harry toward the inner halls. As she crossed the courtyard threshold, the wards reshaped themselves quietly, automatically reweaving to include a new pattern. The shape of a child's breath, the signature of a scar, the stubborn pulse of a foreign knot. Sia followed, heart pounding, mind already racing through what this would mean. A child with a death mark. A child with a soul knot. A child delivered by the river, as if the world itself had refused to let him be placed on a stranger's doorstep. Behind them, the Nile resumed its flow slow, steady, as if nothing had happened. But Sia knew better. Somewhere far away, in a land of rain and stone, someone powerful would wake to the quiet absence of a child they thought they protected. And here, under stars that never lied, the House of Life had just adopted a war. Harry's first memory was not a face. It was a shape. A circle of ink beneath a stone floor, humming like a purring animal. Warm air that smelled of resin and papyrus. A hand resting on his forehead, not pressing, not probing, just there like a promise. And above it all, the Nile's voice, distant but constant, as if the world had one steady heartbeat and he could finally hear it. He didn't remember the night he arrived, but the House of Life remembered him. The Parank didn't treat time like a straight road. They treated it like a tapestry. Some threads you pulled carefully, some you left alone, and some you pinned down so they couldn't strangle everything else. So the first thing they did wasn't train him. They stabilized him. Nefrit was the one who explained it years later, when Harry was old enough to ask questions that weren't just cries and gurgles. "You're not sick," she told him as she ground soot into ink with slow, relentless patience. "You were unsettled. A soul with a thorn in it will twist around that thorn. If you had grown in a careless home, you might have become a storm without understanding why you were raining." Harry, sitting cross-legged on the cool floor, stared at the inkstone. "Am I a storm?" Nefrit didn't look up. Not yet. That was her version of comfort. Hori's version was different. When Harry was too small to know the meaning of scars, Hori stayed nearby, like a wall that had learned how to breathe. He didn't coo. He didn't gush. But he carried Harry through the courtyards, through the halls lined with faded murals. And he spoke to him like Harry was already a person whose opinion mattered. "This is the outer threshold," Hori would say, stepping over a line carved into the stone. "You don't cross it when the lamps are low. Not because monsters live outside." His mouth would curl the tiniest bit, but because people do. Harry would grab his sleeve with sticky baby fingers and laugh, without knowing why Hori's voice sounded like gravel. Sia, meanwhile, treated Harry like the sky had handed her a riddle. She was the one who sat with him at night, when the desert cooled and the stars sharpened. She'd point upward with a finger stained faintly blue with stardust ink. "That one," she'd whisper. "Sopdet." You would call her Sirius. She rises and the river listens. Harry would stare until his eyes watered. Sometimes when the wind hit, just right his scar would prickle like a tiny invisible hook tugging at his skin. When that happened, Sia would pull him closer and hum a song that wasn't a lullaby so much as a pattern, a sound woven to remind the world that this child belonged inside these walls. The prickling would fade, and the House of Life would hum with approval. The first rule, Names have weight. Harry learned early that words were not toys. He learned it the first time he lied. It wasn't a big lie. It was a child's lie, clumsy and instinctive. He was 4, maybe 5, and he'd been told not to touch the ink shelf in the scribe chamber. The ink shelf was temptation. Tiny jars, each sealed with wax and marked with glyphs. Black soot ink for daily writing, green ink for healing, red ink for binding, gold flecks for star work. Some jars hummed faintly, like they were impatient to be used. Harry wanted to touch them. So he did. I yartipped. Wax cracked. A thin stream of ink spilled onto the floor, and the spill didn't behave like a liquid. It crawled slowly, purposefully, like it was searching for a sentence to belong to. Harry froze, wide-eyed. Nefert's voice came from behind him, calm as an execution. Did you touch it? Harry's mouth opened. His heart thumped hard enough to make his scar tickle. No, he said. The ink on the floor jumped. Not physically, not dramatically, but it shivered, as if it had just heard a false note. Nefert stepped closer and crouched, watching the spill. Her eyes flicked to Harry. Again, she said. Harry swallowed. No. The ink went still, then began to curl inward, forming the first strokes of a symbol Harry didn't recognize. A warning. His stomach turned cold. Nefert's gaze sharpened. Do you understand what you have done? Harry's voice came out small. I didn't mean to. I did not ask what you meant, Nefert said. I asked if you understand. Harry stared at the ink as it tightened into a shape like a clenched fist. He whispered it knows. Nefert nodded. Ink remembers. Stone remembers. The house remembers. Here, language is not only sound. It is structure. Harry's cheeks burned. Tears stung his eyes, partly from fear, partly from shame, partly because the ink felt like it was judging him personally. I'm sorry, he blurted, and the words came out like a confession. The ink loosened, just a little. Nefert's hand moved, swift and precise. She traced a small correction glyph in the air, and the spilled ink softened, sliding back into puddle form. Come, she said. Harry followed her, sniffling, through the corridor to a room he didn't like, the Hall of Measures. It wasn't a punishment room in the ordinary sense. There were no whips, no cages, no raised voices. It was worse than that for a child. It was quiet, structured, and full of things that required patience. On the wall, carved into stone, was a single principle written in glyphs so old they looked like they'd grown there. Mayat. Order, balance, truth, rightness. Nefert pointed to it. You will copy this with your own hand. Harry stared. How many times? Nefert looked at him. Until you feel it. So he sat at a low table and copied the glyph sequence again and again with ordinary charcoal. His hand cramped. His nose ran. His tears made gray smudges on the papyrus. But something strange happened around the 20th copy. The line work stopped being random shapes. It began to feel like a spine, like the difference between standing up straight and slouching. Harry's breathing evened out. The tight knot in his chest eased. The scar stopped prickling. Nefert watched him with a kind of clinical satisfaction. There, she said. You felt the lie, and you felt the correction. Harry sniffed. So, I'm not allowed to lie. Nefert's mouth twitched, almost amused. You may lie if you wish, but then you will live in the shape your lie makes. Harry frowned, trying to understand. That sounds bad. Nefert nodded. Good. That day, Harry learned the first rule of Heka. Magic listens to truth. Not morality, not kindness, not intentions. Truth. The second rule, power is not speed. Hogwarts children learned their first spells with wands. Harry learned his first spell with a reed pen. When he was 6, Hori brought him to the training yard, a flat stretch of stone enclosed by walls etched with protective geometry. The yard had 2 features, a shallow basin filled with sand and 3 wooden posts with carved faces that looked vaguely disappointed in you. Hori crouched beside him. This is where you learn not to die. Harry blinked. Am I going to die? Harry's expression didn't change. Not if you listen. He handed Harry a small pouch. Harry opened it and found chalk inside. Not white chalk. Chalk mixed with crushed herbs. It smelled sharp like medicine. What's this for? Harry asked. To write, Harry said. Harry frowned. But we have ink. Harry nodded toward the sandbasin. Ink doesn't like wind. Harry looked at the open air, the faint breeze moving through the yard. He got it. Harry pointed to one of the posts. See that? Harry nodded. Draw the glyph for refusal, Harry said. The simplest one, like Nefert taught. Harry knelt by the sand, tongue sticking out in concentration, and drew the symbol with the chalk. It wasn't perfect. One line was crooked. The curve was too shallow. Harry watched without comment. When Harry finished, Harry said, "Now stand behind it." Harry stood. Harry stepped back, and with his other hand, he flicked a pebble at Harry. Not hard, not cruel, just tossed. Harry didn't move. He expected the pebble to hit him. It didn't. The pebble struck an invisible surface in the air and dropped straight down like it had hit glass. Harry's eyes went wide. It worked. Harry nodded once. Again. Harry drew another. This time, the lines were cleaner. Harry threw the pebble a little harder. It bounced off. Harry's excitement rose like fire. He drew a third symbol, faster too fast, and the last line wobbled. Harry tossed the pebble again. This time it slipped through the thin part of the ward and thumped Harry in the shoulder. Harry yelped and stumbled back. Harry's voice was calm. What did you do wrong? Harry rubbed his shoulder, glaring at the sand like it had betrayed him. It was uneven. Harry nodded. You tried to be quick. Harry's cheeks burned. But I wanted to. To stop the pebble? Harry finished. Then you must want to be correct more than you want to be fast. Harry stared at the ward glyph, at how one shaky line had created a gap. Harry's voice lowered. Wand magic is fast. It is a blade. Heka is slow. It is a wall. Do you understand? Harry nodded slowly. Harry tapped his forehead with one finger. Good. You will live longer. Harry snorted. You always talk like someone is trying to kill me. Harry's eyes slid to the scar. Then back to Harry. Someone is, Harry said simply. Harry's stomach dipped. For the first time, he felt the edges of the thing everyone else in the House of Life already carried, a quiet awareness that he was not an ordinary child playing at magic. He was a child with a nail in his soul, and nails attracted hammers. The third rule, spirits are not pets. Sia introduced Harry to the spirit world the way you introduce a child to the ocean, not with fear, but with respect. On Harry's 7th birthday, she led him out beyond the inner courtyard to a small shrine room with a low ceiling and walls painted in faded blues and golds. A single lamp burned in the center, its flame pale and steady. On the floor, someone had drawn a circle in sand. Sia knelt and motioned Harry down beside her. You felt them, she whispered. The presences in the corners. The watchers. Harry nodded, eyes big. Sometimes he'd woken up at night and felt like the room was full of invisible people holding their breath. Sia held out a small bowl. Inside it was honey. Ariès facile. For me? Sia smiled slightly. Not for you. She dipped her finger in the honey and touched it to the sand circle, drawing a simple offering mark. Then she spoke a name, not the name of a god. Not a name from a story, but a title. Guardian of the Threshold, she whispered, we acknowledge you. The air changed. It thickened. The lamp flame leaned sideways as if it was being watched. Harry's scar prickled sharply, and he sucked in a breath. Sia's hand squeezed his. It's all right. It's only noticing the knot. Only. That word did not make Harry feel better. A shape formed at the edge of his vision, a ripple like heat over stone. It coalesced into something that looked like a tall silhouette with a long head and eyes that glowed faintly like embers behind cloth. Harry's breath caught. The presence did not feel evil. It felt ancient. It felt like a judge who had never once cared about excuses. Sia bowed her head. He is under our roof. The spirit's gaze, if you could call it, that shifted to Harry. Harry felt the weight of it settle onto him like a heavy cloak. Then, without warning, images flickered behind Harry's eyes. A green light, a scream, a cold laugh, the sensation of falling. Harry flinched so hard he almost toppled out of the circle. Sia esse fingere staitent. Stay, she whispered urgently. Harry forced himself to breathe. The spirit didn't move closer. It simply waited, as if it wanted to see what Harry would do when confronted with fear. Harry swallowed hard, and remembering Nefrit's lesson chose truth. I'm scared, he said aloud, voice shaking. The spirit's presence shifted. Not softer, not warmer, but clearer, like it had been waiting for an honest word. Sia leaned close and murmured, now greeted. Harry stared at the silhouette, heart pounding. Hello, he whispered. It was a ridiculous greeting for something older than civilizations. The spirit's gaze held him for another breath. Then receded, dissolving back into the air as if satisfied. Harry exhaled so hard it almost hurt. Sia let out a quiet laugh, relieved. You did well. Harry's voice came out squeaky. It showed me the green light. Sia's face sobered. Yes. Harry swallowed. Is it inside me? Sia met his eyes. The knot is inside you, but you're not the knot. Harry clung to that sentence like a rope. The night of the door. The first time a knot truly pushed back, Harry was 8. It happened on a night when the desert wind rose suddenly, carrying sand like whispered warnings. The House of Life's wards tightened, responding to the weather, but something else tightened to something under Harry's skin. He woke with his scar burning. Not prickling, burning, like someone had pressed hot metal to his forehead. Harry sat up, gasping, and the room blurred. Shadows in the corners felt too deep. The air tasted wrong like old smoke and cold stone. He heard a voice. Not in Arabic. Not in English. Not even in the old tongue Nefrit used for rituals. It was a sound like thought that didn't belong to him. Harry clutched his head, whimpering. The scar throbbed, and in his mind's eye he saw a door blackwood, iron hinges straining as if something behind it was trying to push through. Harry's breath came fast. He couldn't stop the image. He couldn't stop the pressure. His panic rose, and with it rose something else, the urge to shout without words, the urge to lash out. The lamp beside his bed flared violently. The clay cup on his table cracked. The air in the room tightened like a clenched fist. Harry didn't know he was doing it, but he was. Hector responds to truth. And his truth right then was simple. Help. The door in his mind shook harder. Harry's eyes filled with tears. Then the room's wards answered. A soft hum rose through the stone beneath him. The circle of ink under the floor lit faintly, invisible lines becoming visible like a map of protection. The pressure in Harry's scar slammed into something solid. The door image stuttered like a fist hitting a wall instead of face. Harry gasped. Outside his room, footsteps thundered. Hori burst in first, not bothering to knock, knife already in hand. Behind him came Nefrit, calm as always, and Sia, hair loose and eyes wide. Hori scanned the room like he expected a snake to be hiding under the bed. Nefrit's gaze went straight to Harry's forehead. It's pressing, she said. Harry's voice shook. I saw a door. Nefrit's eyes narrowed. Of course you did. Hori moved toward Harry, then stopped when the air around the bed tightened again, wards responding to the knot's pressure. What we do? Sia whispered. Nefrit didn't hesitate. She stepped to the edge of the bed and placed her palm flat on the air above Harry's scar again, not touching skin, touching the field. She spoke a word that made Harry's teeth ache. Measure. The room's ward shifted. The pressure against Harry's forehead did not disappear. Instead, It became defined, contained like a wild animal, suddenly caught in a cage you could see. Harry sucked in a breath that didn't feel like it was made of pain. Nefret's expression remained cold, but her eyes were sharp with focus. "It is waking," she said. Hori's grip on his knife tightened. "Then we should." "No," Nefret snapped, and the word cracked like a whip. "We do not attack blindly." Hori froze. Sia flinched. Harry's scar pulsed again, and for a heartbeat the image of the door returned, shuddering, straining. Harry whimpered, "Make it stop." Nefret's voice softened by a hair. "We can't make it stop forever. We can only teach you to keep it closed." Harry stared at her. "How?" Nefret held his gaze. "With law." She reached into her robe and pulled out a small strip of papyrus already inked with symbols. She placed it gently on Harry's chest. The papyrus was warm. The symbols on it looked like a net. Nefret spoke a sentence slowly, deliberately, as if she was speaking to the universe itself. "This child is under oath of Ma'at." The papyrus warmed further. The net symbols pulsed once. Harry felt the pressure in his scar recoil. Not vanish. Recoil, like something had been warned. Hori exhaled, shoulders loosening slightly. Sia's voice trembled. "Will that hold?" Nefret's eyes didn't waver. "Tonight." Harry stared at the papyrus on his chest, feeling the warmth seep into him like sunlight. "Tonight. Only tonight." That word sat heavy. Hori leaned closer, voice low and fierce. "Listen to me, boy." Harry blinked at him. Hori pointed to Harry's scar. "That thing is not you. It will whisper. It will push. It will try to make you angry, because anger is a door it can open." Harry swallowed hard. Hori's gaze softened just slightly. "So you learn discipline. You learn patience. You learn to build walls inside your own mind." Harry whispered like the sand wards. Hori nodded. "Exactly." Nefret lifted the edge of the papyrus and studied it as if it was a measurement device. "He will begin deeper lessons sooner than planned." Sia's eyes widened. "But he's only 8. Nefret cut her off. "And the knot does not care." Harry's stomach twisted. "Deeper lessons?" Nefret looked down at him. "You will learn your Nile name," she said, "and you will learn what it means to carry 2 threads without letting them tangle." Harry's voice came out small. "Will I ever be normal?" Nefret's gaze held him, steady and honest. "No," she said. Harry's throat tightened, tears rising again. Then Nefret added, "Quieter, but you can be whole." That was the closest thing Nefret ever gave to reassurance. The Nile name. The next morning, as the desert sun climbed and painted the stone golden, Nefret led Harry to the inner hall where the most sacred records were kept. The room smelled like old paper and cool stone. On the far wall was a carved panel, blank to any untrained eye. Nefret pressed her palm to it and spoke a word. The stone shimmered, and writing emerged, names upon names, layered like history itself had been etched there. "This is where we record those who belong under our protection," Nefret said. Harry's scar prickled faintly, but not painfully. More like wary. Nefret dipped her reed pen into ink so dark it looked like it contained night. "Your birth name is Harry," she said. "It ties you to a land of rain and wands and politics you do not yet understand." Harry swallowed. Nefret's eyes narrowed slightly, as if measuring him. "But the river saved you. The house sheltered you. Ma'at holds you." She lifted the pen. "And so you will have a second name. A Nile name. A name that anchors you here, so the knot cannot pretend you are only foreign." Harry's breath hitched. "What is it?" Nefret paused, then wrote one set of glyphs on a fresh strip of papyrus. She turned it to Harry. He couldn't read it yet, but he could feel it. The symbols felt like cool water on skin, like a hand steadying him. Nefret spoke it aloud. "Ammonius Harry." Harry repeated it softly, tasting the sound. "Ammonius Harry." Sia, watching from the doorway, exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. Hori stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the papyrus. Harry looked up. What does it mean? Nefrit's voice was steady. Hidden and protected. Harry's throat tightened. So I'm hidden. Nefrit's gaze sharpened. No, you were hidden. Now you are protected. Harry clutched the papyrus strip with both hands, as if the name could keep his scar from burning again. Nefrit leaned down, her shadow falling over him like a cloak. This is your first anchor, she said. You will need many. Harry whispered because of the knot. Nefrit nodded. Hori's voice came from behind, rough but certain. Because someone out there made a door in you, and we're going to make sure you're the one holding the key. Harry looked down at the glyphs again. Hidden and protected. Harry Potter. Ammonius Harry. 2 threads. 1 life. And somewhere behind a door in his mind, something waited, listening, learning his names. The first time Harry learned to make mist, Nefrit made him do it in a room that had nothing to hide. No pillars, no curtains, no alcoves, only smooth stone walls, an empty floor, and a single oil lamp in the center like a judge. You cannot learn illusion in clutter, Nefrit said, adjusting the wick until the flames stood tall and steady. Clutter gives you excuses. Harry, 8 and stubborn, folded his arms. I don't make excuses. Nefrit looked at him the way she looked at broken spells and careless scribes. You are an excuse. A child is a living excuse. That is why training children is difficult. Harry glared. I'm not that difficult. Hori, standing near the doorway, made a low sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't come out like a cough. Sif sat cross-legged by the wall, watching with bright, curious eyes. She always looked like she was one wrong breeze away from drifting into a daydream. But when it came to magic, she noticed everything. Nefrit tapped the floor with the end of her reed pen. Mist is not smoke. It is not water. It is agreement. Harry blinked. Agreement with what? Nefrit's eyes narrowed. With attention. She pointed at the lamp. Look. Harry looked. The flame danced. Shadows moved across the walls. Normal. Boring. Nefrit continued. The mind wants to complete patterns. It wants to believe it understands what it sees. Mist is not forcing the world to change. Mist is offering the mind a new pattern to complete. Harry frowned. So I'm tricking people. Nefrit's mouth twitched. You are redirecting. A river does not lie when it turns. It simply chooses a different path. Harry wasn't sure he liked that logic, but he didn't argue. Arguing with Nefrit was like arguing with carved stone. The stone didn't yell back. It just waited until you ran out of breath. She handed him a small dish of fine, pale powder crushed limestone mixed with something that smelled faintly sharp. Trace, Nefrit ordered. Harry knelt and traced a simple glyph on the floor. Hide not hide like a child under a bed, but hide like the sun behind cloud. He'd traced it 1,000 times in charcoal and chalk. This time, the powder sparkled faintly, catching the lamplight. Nefrit nodded. Now speak your truth. Harry looked up. My truth? Nefrit's gaze was flat. Yes. Heka responds to truth. If you speak a falsehood, the pattern fails or twists. If you speak a truth without discipline, the pattern becomes dangerous. Harry swallowed. The knot under his scar prickled faintly, as if it liked the word dangerous. Sia leaned forward slightly, interested. Hori crossed his arms tighter, as if bracing for something. Harry stared at the glyph and tried to find a truth that didn't feel too big. He whispered, I don't want to be seen. The air shifted. Not dramatically, no thunder, no glow, but the room's edges softened. The lamp's shadow blurred. The lines of the walls became less certain, like they were being remembered rather than observed. Mist gathered at Harry's ankles. It wasn't wet. It wasn't cold. It was unclear. Harry's eyes widened. It worked. Nefrit nodded, but her gaze sharpened. Hold it. Don't celebrate. Harry clenched his jaw and focused. The mist thickened, rising to his knees, then his waist. It curled around him like a cloak. When Sia blinked, Harry vanished. Not gone Nefrit could still see him, of course. But to ordinary sight, he was swallowed by absence. See, his mouth fell open. Harry. Nefrit held up a hand. Do not call him. Calling is a hook. Harry stood inside the mist, heart pounding. The world felt far away, muted. In here, he felt safe. Hidden. Protected. Ammonius Harry. The Nile name hummed in his chest like a quiet anchor. Nefrit's voice was calm. Now release. Harry hesitated. He didn't want to release. He didn't want to step back into visibility. He swallowed and whispered another truth. I'm here. The mist sighed outward, thinning until the lamp's shadow sharpened again. Harry reappeared like a thought remembered. Sia exalid ashikilaf. You did it. Hori's eyes stayed hard. He did it because he's afraid. Nefrit didn't contradict him. She only said, fear is a truth, but it is not always a healthy truth. Harry bristled. It kept me alive. Nefrit's gaze flicked to his scar. It kept you hidden, not alive. There's a difference. Harry didn't like that, but he couldn't argue without feeling childish. Nefrit stepped closer. Mist is the gentlest illusion. It does not break Ma'at. It only softens sight. She tapped the floor with her reed pen again. But you will learn more than mist. You will learn sandwriting. Harry perked up. That's combat stuff. Hori's mouth twitched. Combat survival. Nefrit's eyes narrowed. It is structure. And that was her answer to everything. Sandwriting. They moved to the training yard. The desert wind was faint today, like it didn't want to interrupt. In the sand basin, Hori had set 3 flat stones in a line like stepping stones. He held out a pouch of sand that looked ordinary, except it shimmered slightly when it caught the sun. Blessed sand, Hori said, taken from the river's edge and mixed with crushed wardstone. It holds shape longer. Harry scooped a handful. It felt warmer than normal sand, like it had a pulse. Hori pointed. Write the binding glyph. On the first stone. Harry knelt and poured sand onto the stone, then used his finger to trace the symbol. It wasn't like writing with ink. Sand wanted to collapse. It wanted to fall back into chaos. Harry remembered Hori's lesson. Correct matters more than fast. He slowed down. He traced carefully. When the glyph finished, the sand lines hardened slightly, holding. Hori tossed a small wooden ring into the air. The ring should have fallen. Gravity should have pulled it down. Instead, it hung for half a heartbeat caught in the glyph's field, then dropped straight down in a neat line, as if guided. Harry grinned. That's so cool. Hori nodded. Again. Harry did the second stone, then the third. Each glyph held stronger than the last. Sia sat on the stone steps nearby, watching with dreamy focus. Nefrit stood in shadow, hands tucked into her sleeves, assessing like a judge. Hori picked up a small practice dagger wooden, blunt, and tossed it toward Harry, not aiming to hit him, just to test the ward's field. Harry's third glyph caught it. The dagger jerked midair like it hit invisible rope, then dropped. Harry's grin widened. He felt strong. Not in the way wizards described strength, flashy spells, and shouting, but in the way walls were strong. He looked at the stones, at the neat symbols, at the sand lines holding against wind and gravity and chance. I like this, Harry admitted. Nefrit stepped forward. Of course you do. Harry frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Nefrit's eyes were sharp. It means you like control. Harry opened his mouth to argue, and stopped, because the knot under his scar pulsed as if it approved of the word control. Harry's stomach tightened. Nefrit saw the flicker in his face. What did you feel? Harry hesitated. Hori's voice cut in blunt. Tell the truth. Harry swallowed. It liked it. Sia's eyes widened. The knot. Harry nodded. Nefrit's voice was calm. Then you will learn a fourth rule. Harry's throat went dry. There are so many rules. Nefrit didn't soften. There will be more. She stepped closer, gaze locked on Harry. Rule 4. Your anger is a lever, and the knot will try to use it. Harry stared at the sandstones, suddenly less excited. Nefert continued. Heka is discipline. The knot will offer you shortcuts. Power without measure. Control without cost. Harry's voice came out small. Can make me do things? Hori's jaw tightened. Not if you're stronger. Harry's cheeks burned. I am strong. Hori's gaze softened a fraction. Then prove it. The hard way. Harry clenched his fists. He hated that he had to prove it. He hated that something inside him could cheer for the wrong reasons. Nefert watched him like she was watching a flame near dry cloth. Good. Continue. The first lie, that wasn't words. It happened later that week. Harry was in the outer courtyard, practicing mist alone. Nefert believed solitude showed you your true habits. Hori believed solitude showed you which habits got you killed. Sio was busy in the Star Chamber, charting alignments. Hori was repairing a threshold ward near the outer gate. Nefert was in the records hall, writing. Harry had been told to stay inside the sanctuary walls. He didn't. Not because he wanted to rebel. Because he heard something. A faint noise beyond the outer gate, voices, distant, muffled by stone. Foreign voices. Not Arabic. Not the old tongue. English. Harry froze, mist dissipating around his hands. English in the desert felt like a ghost. His scar prickled. Harry's stomach tightened. He crept toward the gate, barefoot on stone, heart pounding. The outer gate wasn't a normal door. It was an archway carved with protection geometry, and it didn't open for anyone unless the ward keys agreed. Harry knew that, but he also knew something else. If he stepped close enough, he could listen. He pressed his ear to the cool stone. He heard a man's voice low, impatient. Told you. Magical signature. It flared, then vanished. This place is wrong. Another voice, sharper. No, it's old. That's the difference. Old wards don't show up in our readings until they choose to. Harry's breath caught. They weren't tourists. They weren't locals. They were like him. Modern wizards. His scar pulsed harder. A third voice spoke calm, authoritative. We are not here to attack. We are here to confirm. A child went missing. The river is not a normal path, but magic is never normal when it involves him. Harry's skin went cold. A child went missing. Him. Harry backed away from the gate, panic rising. He ran not out of fear of the voices, but out of fear of what they represented. His past. His land. The war Nefert had warned about. He sprinted down the corridor, heart hammering, and nearly collided with Hori. Hori caught him by the shoulders automatically. What's wrong? Harry's mouth opened. And then, because he didn't want to be taken away, because he didn't want the House of Life to argue about him like he was a package, because the thought of being dragged back into a place he didn't remember made his chest feel like it was collapsing. Harry lit. Not with words. With mist. He whispered, nothing, and let the mist rise around him, softening his expression, blurring his eyes, smoothing the panic out of his face like it was paint. He made himself look calm. Hori's eyes narrowed. Your heartbeat says otherwise, Hori said. Harry forced a laugh. I was just running. Hori's gaze stayed fixed on Harry's face. And Harry realized something terrifying. Mist didn't just hide you from other people. It could hide you from the people who loved you. Harry felt sick. The knot under his scar stirred pleased. It liked deception. It liked hidden doors. Hori's fingers tightened slightly. Show me. Harry's throat tightened. Show you what? Hori leaned closer, voice low. Drop the mist. Harry hesitated. Hori's eyes hardened. Harry. Hearing his birth name from Hori's mouth felt like a hand closing around his ribs. Harry's mist trembled. Then he let it fall. His face snapped back in a raw fear, eyes wide, breath tight. Hori's expression didn't soften. It got dangerous. Who's at the gate? Hori demanded. Harry swallowed, voice trembling. People. English people. Wizards. Hori closed his eyes for half a heartbeat, like he was swallowing rage. Then he said, very quietly, Nefrit. The way he said her name was a warning bell. Harry's stomach dropped. Hori grabbed Harry's arm, not hard enough to hurt, but hard enough to keep him from running, and marched him toward the inner halls. Harry's breath came fast. Hori, please. Hori didn't look at him. You lied. I didn't. You used mist to hide truth. Hori snapped, and there was anger now. That's worse than child's words. Harry's eyes burned with tears. I was scared. Hori's jaw clenched. So was I. They reached the records hall. Nefrit looked up from her writing, eyes immediately sharp. Hori spoke like a verdict. The British are at the outer gate. Nefrit went still. Sia appeared in the doorway, drawn by tone like gravity. What? Harry's voice came out cracked. They said a child went missing. Sia's hand flew to her mouth. Nefrit's gaze locked onto Harry, and Harry flinched because it felt like she could see straight through skin and bone and into the knot. How long have they been there? Nefrit asked. Harry swallowed. I don't know. Minutes. Nefrit stood, robe flowing like a curtain of night. Hori, seal the outer threshold. Hori nodded once and turned to leave. Nefrit's gaze stayed on Harry. And you, she said softly. Harry's stomach twisted. Nefrit's voice didn't rise. That was worse. You lied with magic. Harry's voice shook. I didn't want you to send me away. Sia stepped forward, face tight with worry. Harry. Nefrit lifted a hand, silencing her. Harry's chest heaved. Tears slid down his cheeks. Nefrit stared at him for a long, quiet moment. Then she said coldly, You have just learned why we do not teach illusion before discipline. Harry's scar pulsed, and for a heartbeat he felt the door in his mind tremble like it had heard a weakness. Nefrit's eyes narrowed. Do you feel it? Harry nodded shakily. Yes. Nefrit leaned closer, voice like a knife made of calm. That knot wants you isolated. It wants you to hide truth from us. It wants you alone, because alone is how doors open. Harry's throat tightened. I don't want it. Nefrit's gaze sharpened. Then you will not feed it. Harry whispered, How? Nefrit turned to the wall, where a small carved panel lay blank to most eyes. She pressed her palm to it, and a compartment opened, revealing a thin strip of papyrus inked in red and gold. Nefrit held it up. Harry's breath hitched. The symbols on it felt heavy. Binding. Oath. Nefrit's voice was steady. You will take a measure oath. Sia's eyes widened. Nefrit, he's still a child. Nefrit's gaze flicked to her, and the world outside does not care. She looked back at Harry. This oath is not punishment. It is anchor. Harry stared at the papyrus, fear and relief tangling in his chest. What does it do? Nefrit's voice softened by the smallest degree. It binds your magic to truth in our presence. Harry's stomach dropped. So I can't hide things anymore. Nefrit nodded. Not from your guardians. Harry swallowed hard. Outside, beyond the sanctuary walls, English voices waited. British magic waited. His past waited. Harry's scar burned faintly, like a hand pressing against a door. He looked at Nefrit, then at Sia, then at Hori's retreating back. And he realized something sharp and sudden. If he didn't anchor himself now, he might be pulled apart later. Harry reached out with shaking hands and took the papyrus strip. His fingers touched the ink. It felt like touching law. He whispered, voice trembling, I'll do it. Nefrit's eyes didn't soften, but something like approval settled in the room. Good, she said. And somewhere deep behind Harry's scar, the knot shifted unhappy this time, like a prisoner realizing the bars were thickening. Hori sealed the outer threshold like he was stitching shut a wound. He didn't use a single big word. Big words were loud, and loud words were invitations. Instead, he layered small refusals like bricks, chalk lines that looked like simple decoration, sand sprinkled in corners that didn't quite behave like sand, and names spoken under his breath that made the stone remember how to say no. By dawn, the archway wasn't a door anymore. It was a verdict. Harry stood at the far end of the corridor with Sia, watching as Hori finished the final line. He could feel the ward's pressure in his teeth faint, like the air before lightning. Nefrit appeared behind them without sound. "Where are they?" she asked. Hori didn't turn. Outside, 2 men, 1 woman, all masked by modern concealment. Sia frowned. "Masked how?" Hori's mouth curled. "The lazy way. Cloaks. Charms. They think if something can't see them, it can't measure them." Nefrit's eyes narrowed. "Old wards don't need sight." Harry swallowed. His scar prickled. The door in his mind wasn't pounding, but it was listening, that quiet, uncomfortable awareness that something inside him cared what happened next. Nefrit looked down at Harry. The Measure Oath papyrus was still tucked under his shirt, warm against his chest. He could feel it whenever he tried to swallow a truth. It didn't hurt. It simply refused to let him be slippery. Nefrit's voice lowered. "Tell me, Harry, Ammonius Harry, why didn't you call for us immediately?" Harry's throat tightened. He wanted to say something clever, something defensive, something that made him look brave. The oath made that impossible. "I was scared," Harry admitted, voice small, "and I thought if I waited, maybe they'd leave." Nefrit nodded once, accepting the truth like a document stamped and filed. "And why didn't you tell Hori the full truth when he caught you?" Harry's stomach twisted. "Because I didn't want you to send me away." Sia's eyes softened painfully. Nefrit's gaze didn't. "Do you believe we would send you away?" Harry hesitated. The oath warmed. "Yes," he said. Nefrit's expression tightened. For a heartbeat, she looked almost tired. "Then we have failed in something important." Harry blinked, thrown off. "You failed?" Nefrit's eyes sharpened, as if annoyed at herself for sounding human. "Enough. You will stay behind the inner line. You will not approach the threshold." Harry's mouth opened. The oath warmed again, begging honesty. "I want to see them," Harry blurted. Nefrit's gaze snapped to him. "Why?" Harry swallowed. Because they're from where I'm from." Hori finally turned, his face like stone. "You're from here now." Harry's chest tightened. I know, but nothing," Hori said. "Your past doesn't get to walk through our gate just because it's curious." Nefrit lifted a hand, silencing them both. "Enough. Curiosity is not the issue." She looked at Harry again. "You will not see them because you are not a prize to be inspected." Harry's cheeks burned. "I'm not." "I know," Nefrit cut in. "That is why we will speak to them properly." She turned toward the corridor. "Hori," she said, "open the threshold to voice only." Hori's brows drew together. "Nefrit." "Voice only," she repeated, and the words carried weight. Hori exhaled through his nose, then knelt and pressed his palm to the last chalk line he'd drawn. He whispered a name, and the air around the archway changed subtly, like a curtain being lifted just enough to allow sound through, but not bodies. The House of Life listened. So did the wizards outside. The people beyond the gate. Nefrit walked to the archway as if it were simply another room. Sia followed 2 steps behind her. Hori stayed at Nefrit's shoulder like a shadow with fists. Harry was left behind the inner line, but he could still hear. Outside, a man's voice spoke, first low, calm, and annoyingly polite. "I mean no harm," the voice said. "If someone is listening, please accept my respect. I'm Albus Dumbledore." The name hit Harry like a dropped stone. He didn't know it, but the way Nefrit went still told him it mattered. Hori's jaw tightened. Sia's eyes widened slightly. Nefrit's voice carried through the archway, smooth and cold. "Names are not respect. Intent is." Dumbledore's voice stayed steady. "Then hear my intent. A child under my world's protection vanished years ago. Our wards sensed him again near this place. I've come to confirm he lives and to ensure he is safe." Nefrit's reply was immediate. "He is safe." A pause. Then a different voice, sharper, younger, female. "If he's safe, why hide him behind wards older than our recorded history?" Hori muttered under his breath, "Because you asked like a thief." Nefrit ignored the mutter. Because safety is not a thing you declare. It is a thing you build. Dumbledore's voice softened. Madam, whoever you are, I understand distrust. But this child is important. Nefrit's tone sharpened. So you want him for your importance. Another pause, longer. Dumbledore didn't deny it. He simply said, I want him alive. Sia inhaled, as if she hadn't expected honesty. Nefrit's voice dropped a fraction. Alive is not enough. Then what is enough? Dumbledore asked quietly. Nefrit answered with one word that made the sanctuary's wards hum. Balance. Silence stretched. Then the third voice spoke, the impatient one Harry had heard last night. This is wasting time. If they're hiding him, it means they're interfering. We should notify the ministry. Dumbledore cut in gently, but with steel under it. No. That one syllable shut the others up. Harry felt something twist in his chest. Whoever Dumbledore was, he wasn't weak. Nefrit spoke again. You cannot enter. I've noticed, Dumbledore said dryly. Your wards are impressive. Harry's mouth curled. That's one word for it. Dumbledore continued. But I'd ask if the child is truly safe, why refuse any contact at all? Even confirmation? Nefrit's gaze slid sideways toward Harry behind the inner line. Her eyes were unreadable. Then she said, because confirmation is a hook. Dumbledore's voice was quiet. And you fear we would pull. Nefrit didn't answer directly. There's a knot in him, a foreign shard anchored to his soul. The air outside the gate went very still. Harry heard a small intake of breath. The woman's voice came tense. How do you know that? Nefrit's reply was cold. Because we measure what you ignore. Dumbledore's voice changed, not louder, but heavier. Then you understand what's at stake. Nefrit's eyes narrowed. We understand there is a war. We understand your war uses children as symbols. Harry's hand flexed, like he wanted to punch the air itself. Dumbledore didn't argue. He only said, then tell me this. Do you intend to remove the shard? Nefrit's voice was clinical. Not now. The impatient voice snapped, so you can't. Nefrit's tone sharpened into something dangerous. We won't until it can be done without tearing him. Dumbledore exhaled softly. That is wiser than many in my world. Sia's gaze flicked to Nefrit, surprised. Nefrit didn't soften. Do not praise us to make us pliable. A faint smile tugged at Dumbledore's voice. Fair. Another pause. Then Dumbledore said, I won't force the threshold. I won't bring the ministry to your doorstep. But I need one thing. Nefrit's eyes narrowed. Ask. Proof of life, Dumbledore said. A token. A sign. Not a location. Not a path. Just confirmation that the child has not died quietly behind silence. Harry's voice was low. And if we refuse? Dumbledore replied simply, then I will keep searching. That landed like a stone. Because it wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Nefrit looked at the archway for a long moment, as if weighing worlds. Then she said, we will give you a sign. Harry turned sharply. Nefrit. Nefrit lifted a hand. Balance, Harry. She stepped back from the threshold and turned towards Sia. Bring the star water. Sia moved quickly. Harry's pulse hammered. His scar prickled again, as if whatever lived in the knot liked the idea of being noticed. Nefrit glanced at Harry. Stay. Harry's mouth opened. The oath warmed. I want to help, he said. Nefrit's gaze sharpened. No. Harry's chest tightened. But? Nefrit's voice cut clean. You're not a bargaining chip. You're the reason we bargain. Harry swallowed hard and stayed behind the line, fists clenched, feeling useless and furious and ashamed of both. Sia returned with a small bowl of star water, shimmering faintly. Nefrit dipped her finger into it and traced a simple symbol in the air, alive, not heartbeat, not breath, but continuance. The symbol hung like a pale thread. Then she spoke Harry's Nile name softly, but with law. Ammonius Harry. The thread tightened, as if it had found the correct stitch in a tapestry. Nefrit flicked her fingers toward the threshold. The symbol drifted outward like a moth and vanished beyond the archway. Outside, Dumbledore inhaled sharply. I felt it, he said quietly. He's here. Nefrit's voice was flat. He is alive. That is all you get. Dumbledore's tone carried real relief and real worry. Thank you. Nefrit didn't respond to gratitude. She only said, if you search again, your searching will be measured as aggression. Dumbledore answered, then I will not search again unless forced. The woman's voice snapped Albus. Dumbledore cut her off gently. We've learned what we needed. The impatient voice muttered, bitter, or we've learned we're locked out. Dumbledore ignored him. He spoke once more, voice quieter now, almost like he was speaking to someone just out of reach. To the child, he said, if you can hear me live well, that's all I ever wanted for you. Harry's throat tightened. Nefrit's eyes narrowed, as if she disliked the sudden tenderness. Then the voices faded, footsteps crunching on sand, magic shifting, departure. The outer world withdrew. The House of Life exhaled. Hori turned away from the threshold, as if the very idea of those voices annoyed him. Sia stood still, hand pressed her chest, eyes distant. He meant it, she whispered. Nefrit's gaze was hard. Meaning is not enough. Harry stepped forward, unable to stop himself. He said he wanted me to live well. Nefrit looked down at him. And you believed him? The oath warmed. Yes, Harry admitted. Nefrit's expression didn't soften. Then you must learn the fifth rule. Harry's shoulders slumped. More rules. Nefrit's voice was calm as stone. Rule 5. Kindness can be a hook too. Harry stared at her, stunned. Nefrit continued. You may have met a man who genuinely wishes you well. That does not mean his world will treat you well. It does not mean his decisions will be gentle. Intent does not erase consequence. Harry swallowed. So I can't trust anyone. Nefrit's eyes sharpened. I didn't say that. Hori spoke from the side, blunt. Trust carefully. Sia added softly, trust with anchors. Harry's fingers touched the warm papyrus under his shirt. Anchors. He nodded, even though his stomach still felt like it was falling. 3 years in a single breath. Time moved strangely after that. Not because days blurred, Harry remembered every lesson, every ward, every correction, but because his life became structured. He learned to write his own Nile name in ink, so precise it felt like carving. He learned to draw refusal glyphs in sand without shaking hands. He learned spirit etiquette, how to offer honey, how to speak without arrogance, how to listen when silence was the answer. He learned the difference between Ma'at and Isfit in real terms. Ma'at felt like clean lines, steady breathing, and a room that didn't fight you. Isfit felt like shortcuts, hot anger, and the itch under his scar that whispered more. Sometimes, when he got frustrated when his ward lines collapsed, when Nefrit corrected him for the 10th time in 1 hour, he felt the knot stir with hungry approval. Those nights, he sat in the Hall of Measures copying Ma'at until his rage cooled into something steadier. Hori drilled him with survival. Don't cast when you can step aside. Don't step aside when you can anchor the ground. Don't anchor the ground if you're angry. Sia taught him timing. The stars don't rush, Harry. Neither should you. And Nefrit taught him law. Magic is not force. It is agreement. Harry grew taller. His shoulders broadened. His eyes sharpened. He stopped being a child who cried easily. He became a child who held things fear, anger, curiosity without letting them spill everywhere. The door behind his scar didn't disappear, but stopped pounding. It waited, and Harry learned to wait back. The letter. It arrived on a morning so ordinary it almost felt insulting. The sun was bright. The Nile was calm. Hori was repairing a chipped wardstone near the courtyard. Sia was humming over a star chart. Nefrit was writing. Harry was 11. He was tracing a protection glyph on papyrus when the air in the courtyard blinked. Not shimmered. Not flared. It simply blinked, like reality had momentarily forgotten what was allowed. A bird made of folded parchment fluttered into the courtyard. It wasn't a hawk. It wasn't an ibis. It wasn't any living thing. It was an origami shape animated by stubborn, modern magic. It circled once confused, as if the House of Life's wards offended it, then dove toward Harry like it had been told his name was the only compass it needed. Harry froze. His scar prickled. The paper bird landed on the stone in front of him and unfolded itself into a letter. Cream parchment, green ink, a wax seal stamped with a coat of arms he didn't recognize but somehow felt castle, animals, history, authority. Nefrit's pen stopped scratching. Sia's humming died. Hori straightened slowly, eyes narrowing like he'd just spotted a snake. Harry stared at the letter as if it might bite. On the front, in precise green script, was written, Mr. Harry Potter. For a moment, Harry couldn't breathe. His birth name. In his sanctuary. His scar pulsed once, as if the knot enjoyed being addressed. Nefrit walked forward, expression cold. She didn't touch the letter yet. As if touching it would let it hook into the house. What is it? Sia whispered. Hori's voice was flat. A summons. Harry swallowed hard. His fingers trembled. The measure oath warmed against his chest, reacting to the truth that rose up so fast it tasted like metal. He wanted to open it. He wanted to know. He wanted to step into that other world and see what it looked like: rain, stone, castles, wands. He wanted answers about the knot. He wanted to meet the man who'd spoken through the gate: consideration and tenderness, like those things mattered. Nefrit's gaze slid to Harry's face, and Harry knew she could read him without magic. You want it, she said. The oath warmed. Yes, Harry admitted. Hori took one step forward. No. Harry flinched. Hori. Hori's eyes stayed hard. That letter should not have found you. The only reason it did is because someone built their system to ignore boundaries. Sia's voice was quieter. Or because your blood is a path they never stop tracking. Nefrit finally picked up the letter between two fingers, noting its seal, its ink, the stubborn way it tried to sit in the world like it belonged. This is Hogwarts, she said. Harry's breath hitched. The name felt like a door opening in his head, not the scar door, something else. Curiosity. Nefrit held the letter out. Harry didn't take it right away. He looked at Nefrit, at Sia, at Hori. He felt the house around him, its old stone, its quiet wards, its rules that had kept him alive. Then he looked at the letter again. His voice came out rough. If I don't go, will they keep looking? Hori's mouth tightened. They promised not to search. Nefrit's gaze was sharp. Promises are not chains. Harry swallowed. And the knot. Nefrit's eyes narrowed. Yes. Harry's throat tightened. I need to understand it. Sia stepped closer, gentle. You can understand it here. Harry's eyes stung. Not everything. Not he nodded at the letter. That world made it. That world did this to me. Hori's jaw clenched. Nefrit stared at the letter like it was a problem to be solved, not a destiny to be embraced. Then she said, slowly, if you go with anchors. Harry nodded quickly. Yes. Nefrit's gaze sharpened. And you go by choice. Harry's breath caught. So, I can choose. Nefrit's eyes didn't soften, but her voice did barely. Yes. Hori snapped, he's 11. Nefrit turned on him, and the knot has waited 11 years. Silence snapped tight. Harry looked at the letter again. His hand stopped trembling, not because he wasn't scared, but because the fear had turned into something steadier. Resolve. He reached out and took the letter. The wax seal felt warm, like a hand trying to hold his wrist. Harry met Nefrit's eyes. I want to go. The oath warmed with fierce agreement. Nefrit held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once. Then we prepare, she said. Hori's shoulders tensed. Nefrit. Nefrit didn't look away from Harry. We do not fear the world by hiding from it forever. We balance. Harry swallowed hard. What do I do first? Nefrit's eyes narrowed, already planning. First, you open that letter. Harry's fingers hooked under the seal. His scar prickled. The door behind it listened. And Harry, Omnius Harry, hidden and protected, broke the wax like he was breaking a boundary. Harry opened the letter like it might hiss. It didn't. It was worse. It was polite. The invitation. The parchment unfolded with that crisp, confident snap of modern British magic that assumed the world would make space for it. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Harry read it twice, then a third time, slower, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less real. A school, a castle, a place where children learn magic with wands and textbooks and rules written by people who didn't know Ma'at existed as anything other than a dusty concept in a history chapter. The supplies list stared back at him like a dare. 1 wand, 3 sets of plain work robes, a cauldron, a telescope, an owl or cat or toad. Harry's eyes paused on wand. His scar prickled faintly, like the knot found the idea amusing. Nefrit stood beside him, reading over his shoulder without apology. They teach children to channel with sticks. Harry frowned. It's not a stick. Nefrit's eyes narrowed. It is a tool. Hori snorted from the doorway. Tools are fine. People are the problem. Sia drifted closer, gaze fixed on the ink. A castle school, she murmured, like a temple, but colder. Harry swallowed. Do I have to go? Nefrit didn't answer for him. She never did. She asked instead, do you still choose it? The measure oath warmed under his shirt, waiting. Harry's throat tightened. Yes, he said. Nefrit nodded once, as if stamping a decision onto stone. Then we prepare anchors. Anchors, not armor. Preparation in the House of Life didn't look like packing bags. It looked like building rules into your body. Nefrit brought him to the Hall of Measures and laid out 3 strips of papyrus on the low table. Each one held red and gold ink symbols, so fine they looked like hair. These are not weapons, she said. They are agreements. Harry leaned forward, eyes scanning the glyphs. He could read most of them now, not fluently like Nefrit, but enough to understand the bones. Truth within the circle, refusal against curses, return to sanctuary if broken. Harry's stomach dipped at the last one. Return? Nefrit's eyes were sharp. If the knot surges, if you lose balance, if you become dangerous to yourself. Harry swallowed hard. The knot stirred faintly, like it disliked the word return. Hori appeared behind him, arms crossed. If it gets bad, you come home. No hito nonsense. Harry's cheeks burned. I'm not. Hori cut him off. Good. Sia set a small bundle on the table, a thin leather cord and, at its center, a simple ankh carved from dark wood and ringed with a faint gold line. It wasn't flashy. It was quietly stubborn. Harry touched it and felt a hum like the sanctuary's ward lines. What is it? He asked. Sia's voice was soft. A focus, not a wand, not a replacement, a reminder. Nefrit's gaze hardened, and a boundary. You will not let foreign magic teach you to forget your own law. Harry curled his fingers around the ink. So this helps me do hecka faster? Nefrit's eyes narrowed. No. Harry slumped. Then what? It helps you do hecka cleaner, Nefrit said. You want speed. Speed feeds Isfit. Clean work feeds Ma'at. Harry exhaled, annoyed, then stopped because she was right, and that was the most irritating kind of right. Hori tossed a small tin into Harry's lap. Ink. Harry opened it. Inside were 3 tiny compartments. Black ink, standard. Green ink, healing/repair. A thin strip of dried red ink cake, binding. Hori's voice was flat. You don't use the red unless you have to. Harry looked up. What counts as have to? Hori stared at his scar. when something tries to take you. Harry's throat went tight. Got it. Nefrit slid the papyrus strips forward. These are your first portable seals. You can apply one to your skin, under clothing, with a touch of water. They last hours, not days. Harry's eyes widened. Only hours? Nefrit's tone was cold. If you want permanence, you must earn it. Sialin din, ais bright. Your life at Hogwarts will be fast. You will learn to choose which anchors matter most. Harry stared down at the seals. Truth, refusal, return. He suddenly felt very small. Leaving the House of Life wasn't just leaving home. It was leaving a system that understood him, and stepping into one that might try to rewrite him. The path to London. They didn't travel like normal people. No trans, no planes, no ports. On the night before they left, Nefrit took Harry to the river's edge. The Nile was black glass under moonlight. Rach whispered. The air smelled like cool water and stone. Nefrit crouched, dipped her fingers into the river, and drew a small circle on the sand. Hori drew a second circle around it. Sia placed a single star chart pebble at the north point. 3 circles. 3 guardians. 1 child. Nefrit looked at Harry. This passage is not escape, she said. It is permission. Harry swallowed. Permission from who? Nefrit's eyes flicked to the water. From the world. Sia took Harry's hand. Her fingers were warm and steady. Hori placed his palm briefly on Harry's shoulder, heavy, grounding. Nefrit spoke a sentence that tasted like ink and law. Let the river carry what it has chosen to protect. The water rippled. The sand circle brightened faintly. Harry's scar prickled, then eased, like the knot had been forced to sit down and behave. The world tilted. Not violently, not painfully, like stepping from one room into another and realizing the air smells different. Then, Harry was standing in a narrow alley behind a quiet street. The night air damp and cold, the sky a dull gray instead of star-sharp. London. Rain hovered in the air like it was deciding whether to commit. Harry inhaled and tasted stone, smoke, and old magic. He clutched the ink under his shirt. Behind him, the 3 guardians stood in shadow, looking like ordinary travelers to any careless eye. Nefrit's gaze moved across the street, measuring. This place is loud, she murmured. Hori grunted. It smells like politics. Sia tilted her head, listening to the sky. The stars are muffled. Harry's stomach fluttered. So this is my other world. Nefrit's eyes narrowed. It is a world that thinks it is the only world. Diagon Alley. Diagon Alley hit Harry like a wall of noise. Not sound, though. There was plenty of chatter, but magic noise. Enchanted signs, glamour charms, potion fumes, wards stacked on wards like people had been patching holes for centuries without ever rebuilding the foundation. It made Harry's teeth ache. He kept his face calm anyway. He had learned that calm was armor in a loud place. Hori stayed close, watching everyone. Sia drifted slightly behind, eyes wide with interest. Nefrit walked like she belonged, which was somehow more unsettling than fear. The first time a wizard glanced at Harry's scar, Harry felt the knot stir, curious, hungry. He pressed 2 fingers lightly to the papyrus seal under his collarbone. Refusal. The stirring eased. Nefrit led him into the robe shop first. The tape measure tried to wrap itself around Harry's neck like a snake. Harry stared at it. It fell limp. Hori's mouth twitched. Good. Sia laughed softly. It recognized his no. Nefrit didn't laugh. Everything recognizes no when it is spoken correctly. They bought books. They bought a cauldron. They bought a telescope that Harry held like it was a strange animal. Then they reached the shop Harry had been thinking about since he read the letter. Ollivanders. The sign looked ancient, but not House of Life ancient. More like old family pride ancient. Harry stepped inside, and dust and wood and quiet hit him. The shop felt like it was holding its breath. A man appeared between shelves like he'd been waiting there for years and had simply decided now was the moment to be visible. Mr. Ollivander's pale eyes locked onto Harry's forehead. "Oh," Ollivander whispered. "Yes, yes, of course." Harry stiffened. The knot stirred, pleased at recognition. Neferet's gaze sharpened, and the air around her felt suddenly structured. Ollivander's eyes flicked to her, then away, as if something about her presence made him uncomfortable without him understanding why. "Mr. Potter," Ollivander said, voice almost reverent. Fascinating. Harry didn't like reverence. Reverence was how people justified stupid decisions. "I need a wand," Harry said plainly. Ollivander smiled like a man being offered dessert. "Indeed. Indeed you do." The measuring tape returned this one more cautious, as if it had heard rumors. Ollivander measured Harry's arms, his fingers, the distance between his eyes. Then he began handing Harry wands. The first wand sparked and spat like it didn't want to be touched. The second wand made Harry's scar burn. Harry dropped it immediately. Ollivander's eyes widened. "Oh." Neferet's voice cut in cold. "Do not feed curiosity." Ollivander blinked. "Pardon?" Neferet didn't repeat herself. She didn't need to. Ollivander moved more carefully after that, like a man stepping around a sleeping animal. He returned with a wand made of pale wood and dark grain, simple and unassuming. "Try this," he murmured. Harry took it. The wand felt like a translator, not a friend, not an extension of his hand. A tool that wanted to do its job. Harry flicked it slightly, not a full motion, just instinct. A small gust stirred the dust on the counter. Nothing explosive. Nothing dramatic. But the shop's air shifted, acknowledging a connection. Ollivander exhaled, delighted and uneasy at once. "Curious," he murmured. "Very curious." Harry stared at the wand in his hand. The knot under his scar pulsed once testing, then went quiet. Neferet's gaze stayed hard. "He will not be ruled by it." Ollivander swallowed. "No, of course." Harry looked at Neferet. "Do I have to use this?" Neferet's eyes narrowed. "You have to understand their system so it cannot trap you." That was her version of encouragement. So Harry bought the wand. But when he tucked it into his robe sleeve, he felt the ink under his shirt like a second heartbeat. Platform 9 3/4. The barrier between platforms felt stupid. A brick wall pretending it wasn't a wall. Harry stared at it, then at the families bustling around, at the casual way they treated secret gates like normal doors. Hori leaned close. "You're going alone from here." Harry's chest tightened. "You're not coming?" Neferet's voice was flat. "We are not enrolling in their world." "You are." Sia smiled softly and tucked something into Harry's palm. A tiny folded paper charm inked with a star mark. "If you feel lost," she whispered, "open it. It won't solve problems, but it will remind you you're seen." Harry's throat went tight. He hated that he was suddenly the kind of person who wanted to cry. Hori squeezed his shoulder once. "Don't get sentimental." Harry snorted, blinking hard. "You're the sentimental one." Hori's mouth twitched. "Lies." Neferet stepped closer. Her shadow fell over him like a cloak. "You will be tempted," she said quietly, "to become what they expect, to become their symbol, their weapon, their story." Harry swallowed. Neferet's eyes bored into him. "Remember, you're not a letter. You're not a prophecy. You are a living thread with two names." Harry's voice came rough. "Harry and Ammonius Harry." Neferet nodded. "Good." Then, as if it cost her something to say it, she added softly, "And you are ours." Harry's breath hitched. He didn't trust his voice, so he just nodded hard. He turned, took a breath, and walked straight at the barrier. The wall swallowed him. And then, steam, noise, a scarlet train breathing like a dragon. Hogwarts Express. Harry stood on platform 9 3/4, heart hammering, wand heavy in his sleeve, ink warm against his chest, and the knot behind his scar suddenly very, very awake. Because he could feel it. So many people, so many spells, so many opportunities for chaos. Harry pressed 2 fingers to his truth seal. Steady. The castle that didn't speak his language. The Great Hall was bigger than any temple room Harry had ever been in. The ceiling was enchanted sky, clever, showy. Floating candles, pretty, unsafe. For long tables, children sorting themselves into tribes. Tribes. Harry didn't like tribes. Tribes made wars easier. He walked in with the first years, and whispers slid through the hall like snakes through grass. That's him. The scar. Potter, where's he been? Why does he look like that? Harry kept his face calm. Calm as a wall. At the staff table, a tall man with half-moon glasses watching blue eyes bright with too much understanding. Dumbledore. Harry felt something in his chest twist, half curiosity, half resentment. A man who wanted him to live well, in a world that had lost him. Beside Dumbledore sat a pale, sharp-faced man whose gaze hit Harry like ice. Snape. That gaze didn't carry curiosity. It carried suspicion, almost disgust, like Harry's existence was a personal insult. Harry's fingers twitched toward the ink. Nefert's voice echoed in his mind. Kindness can be a hook too. So can hatred, Harry thought. The sorting hat was placed on his head. It smelled like old cloth and older secrets. A voice slipped into his mind like smoke. Ah, it said, you're complicated. Harry didn't flinch. I know. 2 threads. 2 names. 1 scar that isn't only scarred that I see courage. I see hunger. I see discipline. I see, oh, that's interesting law. Harry's scar prickled. The knot listened. Harry didn't speak aloud. He thought, carefully, I'm not the knot. The hat hummed. Good. Most don't say that. Slytherin would love your control. Ravenclaw would love your structure. Hufflepuff would love your balance. Harry's stomach tightened. Then the hat's tone shifted sharper. And Gryffindor would force you to face what you'd rather hide. Harry's chest tightened. Face it. That was why he came. Not to belong. Not to be praised. To understand the door behind his scar and make sure he nodded decided when it opened. Harry thought, steady as a ward line. Put me where I don't get to run away. The hat paused. Then, Gryffindor. The table erupted in cheers. Harry walked toward it like he was walking into a storm on purpose. As he sat, a bushy-haired girl near the end of the table stared at him like he was a living book she wanted to read. Hermione Granger, Harry realized suddenly, though he didn't know how he knew her name. Maybe the world had a way of introducing the important ones. She didn't look scared. She looked interested. That was new. Across the hall, Dumbledore's gaze softened just slightly. Snape's did not. Harry felt the knot stir, pleased at conflict. He pressed his fingers to the refusal seal under his collarbone and breathed slowly. No sorcuts. No is fit. Not tonight. The feast began, food appearing out of nowhere like magic, trying to prove it could be generous. Harry ate carefully, tasting the difference between abundance and balance. When the hall finally emptied and the first years were led toward their dorms, Harry lagged behind for 1 second, just one glancing up at the enchanted ceiling. A fake sky. Beautiful. Controlled. A place where someone decided what you were allowed to see. He didn't like that. In the doorway, Dumbledore caught his eye from across the room. Not a stare. Not a demand. Just a quiet look that said, I see you. I am aware. We will talk. Harry didn't nod. He didn't look away either. He simply kept walking. Because one thing was already clear. Hogwarts didn't know what to do with a boy raised by the Nile. And Harry wasn't sure yet whether that was dangerous for Hogwarts. Or for him. Hogwarts had a smell. Not like the House of Life resin, stone, river cool, air. This place smelled like old wool, candle smoke, damp corridors, and 1,000 spells layered on top of each other until the castle itself felt like a living scrapbook. Harry lay awake in the Gryffindor dormitory, staring at the canopy of his bed. Above him, fabric. Not stars. Not sky. Not truth. His scar prickled once, as if the knot found the thought entertaining. Harry pressed 2 fingers lightly to the truth seal under his collarbone and breathed until the prickling faded. Across the room, Ron Weasley snored like he'd been personally offended by silence. Harry's mouth twitched. At least some things were universal. The first day problem, speed. Charms class was where Harry realized British magic was obsessed with speed. Professor Flitwick was small, enthusiastic, and terrifyingly precise. He literally bounced on a stack of books so he could see his students. Today, Flitwick squeaked, eyes bright. We begin with the levitation charm. Wingardium Leviosa. Wands flicked. Voices rose. Feathers quivered, then floated. The room filled with that light. Cheerful energy Hogwarts seemed to love. Children discovering they could make the world obey them. Harry didn't lift his wand. He didn't even take it out at first. He watched. He listened. He measured. Because he could feel it. The way the spell worked, like a thin wire from wand tip to object. The wire was strong enough to pull a feather, but only if you held it just right. A blade. Fussed. Clean. Fragile. Flitwick's gaze landed on Harry. Mr. Potter, would you like a try? Every head turned. Harry felt the knot stir, pleased. Spotlight. Attention. Pressure. He inhaled slowly. No, he thought. Not refusal. Not defiance. Just measured choice. He pulled his wand from his sleeve and stood. He did the motion like Flitwick showed, but his wrist remained steady, not eager. Wingardium Leviosa, Harry said. His feather rose. Not dramatically, not like a firework. It lifted smoothly, controlled, and hovered in place as if it had been asked politely. The class went quiet for half a heartbeat. Then Ron whispered, loudly, blimey. Flitwick beamed. Excellent control, Mr. Potter. Very good. Harry sat down, face calm. Inside, he felt slightly sick. Because when the feather rose, he'd felt something else. The knot had perked up like an animal hearing a familiar whistle. Not at the levitation spell. At the attention. Harry pressed his fingers under the desk, touching the edge of the refusal seal. It warmed faintly. Good. Hermione's eyes. At lunch, Hermione Granger slid onto the bench across from him like she'd been planning it since the hat shouted his house. Harry stiffened. He didn't flinch outwardly. He'd learned that flinching made people curious. Hermione didn't seem deterred. Hi, she said, brisk. Harry Potter. He blinked. Yes. She frowned. That's not. Sorry. I am Hermione Granger. I just. She looked him over as if cataloging. Harry had been cataloged before, usually by spirits. This was worse. You don't cast like everyone else, Hermione said. Harry's jaw tightened. I cast fine. Hermione waved a hand, impatient. Not the result. The feel. It's like you don't push. You set. Harry paused. That was annoyingly close. Ron leaned in, suspicious. You can feel that? Hermione rolled her eyes. I can see patterns, Ronald. Harry stared at her, measuring. In a house of life, people didn't ask questions unless they were prepared for answers that cut. Hermione looked like the type who loved cuts, especially if they were educational. Harry said carefully, I was taught differently. Hermione's eyes sharpened. Where? Harry's truth seal warmed. He could dodge. He could miss the answer. The measure oath back home wouldn't let him, but that oath wasn't physically on him anymore. Still, the habit remained. He chose a controlled truth. Not in England, he said. Hermione's eyes widened. So you weren't raised by. Ron's face twisted. The Muggles? Harry's scar prickled like the knot enjoyed the thought of him being an abandoned mystery. Harry kept his voice flat. No. Hermione leaned closer. Then who taught you? Harry looked down at his food, then back up. People who believe magic has rules bigger than school rules. Hermione's gaze sparked with interest, like someone had just handed her a forbidden textbook. Like what? Harry hesitated. Then he said quietly, "Truth matters." Ron snorted. "Truth matters to everyone." Harry looked him dead in the eye. "No, it matters to magic." Hermione's mouth parted slightly. "That's not how wands work." Harry's eyes narrowed. "That's how I work." Hermione didn't look offended. She looked delighted. "I want to see it," she said immediately. Ron groaned. "Of course you do." Harry's scar prickled again, sharper. He pressed a finger to the refusal seal, but the prickling didn't fully fade. Because it wasn't only the knot. It was the castle. Something about Hogwarts itself had noticed him. Like a lock noticing a key that didn't belong. Defense against something. Defense against the dark arts was the first class that made Harry's skin crawl. Not because of the subject. Because of the teacher. Professor Quirrell smelled wrong. Not like sweat or fear or stale garlic, though there was plenty of garlic. Wrong like something wearing a person. Harry sat in the back, calm, watching. Quirrell stammered through a lecture about vampires, his hands shaking. The class giggled, bored. Harry felt his scar prickle, not burning, not door pressure, but a tiny, eager tug. His stomach tightened. That tug was familiar. It was the same kind of tug the threshold spirits gave when they recognized an imbalance. Harry's gaze sharpened. Quirrell turned slightly, and for one heartbeat, Harry saw it. Not with eyes, with the part of him that read fields. A shadow behind Quirrell. A second presence coiled tight, like a snake wrapped around a throat. Harry's breath hitched. The knot under his scar pulsed in response. Like a dog scenting another dog. Harry's hands clenched under the desk. This wasn't just about him. This wasn't just about his scar. Voldemort, whatever he was now, was closer than anyone here understood. Harry lifted his wand slowly, not to attack but to test. He whispered under his breath, not English, not Latin, an old word Nefrit had taught him for measure. The air around Quirrell shivered. Quirrell jerked like he'd been slapped. His stammering paused. His eyes flicked toward Harry, wild, panicked. Then Quirrell looked away fast and continued talking louder, faster, as if noise could cover the fact that he'd been noticed. Harry lowered his wand, heart pounding. Ron, sitting 2 seats away, whispered, "What's wrong with you?" Harry forced his voice calm. "Nothing." Hermione leaned closer. "Your face says you're lying." Harry's throat tightened. He hated that she was already getting good at reading him. He whispered back, barely moving his lips, "He's wrong." Hermione frowned. "Quirrell?" Harry nodded once. Hermione's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "Because of your scar?" Harry hesitated. The scar prickled. The knot listened. "Harry chose a careful truce." "Because of what my scar responds to." Hermione stared at him like he'd just introduced a new branch of science. The castle reacts. The first time Harry fell, Hogwarts recognized the scar as a latch. It happened by accident. He was walking alone one evening, after dinner, because Gryffindor common room laughter felt too loose, too unmeasured. He wandered the corridor near the 3rd floor and paused. He didn't know why. His scar prickled faintly. Not pain. Not warning exactly. More like a compass needle twitching. Harry's breath slowed. He pressed his fingers to his scar. The prickling intensified. The air in front of him shifted. A wall, an ordinary stone wall, rippled slightly, like water disturbed. Harry froze. Then the wall moved. A seam appeared, thin as a hairline crack. A door where there hadn't been one. Harry's heart slammed. The knot under his scar pulsed, pleased, eager. Like it recognized a mechanism. Harry stared at the door. This wasn't Hecca. This wasn't law or ink or discipline. This was Hogwarts reacting to him, reacting to the thing inside him. A latch. Cari Guisperth. No. He didn't step forward. He didn't touch it. He backed away slowly, eyes locked on the seam until it smoothed back into plain stone. His scar prickled for another second disappointed, then faded. Harry stood very still in the corridor, cold spreading through his chest. Because that door hadn't appeared because Hogwarts liked him. It had appeared because Hogwarts recognized something in him that belonged to old security. Old wards, old keys, old hidden places. And the thing inside him, the knot, liked it. Harry hurried back to Gryffindor Tower like he was outrunning a shadow. Hermione finds a crack. He didn't tell anyone. Not that night. He told himself he was being careful. But the truth was uglier. He didn't want Hogwarts to become a puzzle he had to solve, because puzzles always tempted him to touch them. And touching things was how doors opened. But Hermione Granger didn't believe in leaving puzzles unsolved. 2 days later, she cornered him in the library. Not dramatically, not loudly, just there in the aisle between ancient runes and magical theory, blocking his escape with a stack of books. "You've been avoiding the third-floor corridor," she said. Harry went still. "How would you?" Hermione lifted a book slightly. "Because I was there yesterday, and you nearly tripped over yourself turning away." Harry's cheeks burned. "I didn't." Hermione leaned closer. "You felt something. Your scar, your whatever it is." Harry's truth seal wasn't here, but the habit of honesty tugged anyway. He whispered a door. Hermione's eyes widened. "A door?" Harry nodded once, jaw tight. It wasn't there, then it was. Hermione's mind caught fire. He could see it in her eyes. Hidden doors don't appear for no reason. Harry's voice went flat. "They do if you have the wrong key." Hermione froze. "Your scar." Harry didn't answer. He didn't have to. Hermione exhaled slowly, gaze sharpening. "It reacted to you like a key." Harry swallowed. Hermione's voice dropped, serious now. "Harry, why would Hogwarts do that?" Harry's stomach turned. Because Hogwarts was built to hide things. And whoever built it centuries ago might have known about soul knots, latches, and foreign shards. Or worse, someone had modified the castle recently to respond to the scar. Harry whispered, "I don't know." Hermione studied him. "But you want to." Harry's scar prickled. The knot agreed. Harry clenched his fists. "No." Hermione blinked. "No." Harry's voice shook slightly. "I can't afford curiosity without discipline." Hermione stared at him like he'd just refused dessert on principle. "That's the strangest thing anyone's ever said to me." Harry almost smiled. Almost. Hermione's expression softened. "Okay," she said carefully. "Then we do it your way." Harry blinked. "My way?" Hermione nodded once. "Rules. Structure. We measure before we touch." Harry stared at her. For the first time since arriving at Hogwarts, he felt something settle in his chest that wasn't fear. A small, cautious sense of allyship. He whispered, "Fine." Hermione's eyes gleamed. "Good. Then tell me your rules." Harry hesitated, then spoke like he was laying ward stones. 1. We don't go alone. 2. We don't go angry. 3. We don't touch anything until we understand what it's meant to do. 4. If my scar burns, we leave. Hermione nodded, serious. "Agreed." Harry added, quieter, 5. If it feels like a door, we don't open it just because it exists. Hermione's gaze held his. "Agreed." Harry exhaled slowly. Somewhere deep behind his scar, the knot stirred annoyed, like it didn't like agreements. Harry pressed his fingers to the ink under his shirt, grounding himself. A message from the past. That night, Harry sat at his desk in the dormitory, pretending to do homework while Ron argued with Seamus about Quidditch. Harry dipped his finger into ink and traced a tiny symbol on the underside of his trunk, so small no one would notice, so precise it felt like breathing. He whispered a word. The symbol warmed. It wasn't a portal. It wasn't a door. It was an echo, a way to send a single measured thought down the river path to the house of life. Sia's star charm in his pocket warmed faintly in response, like it was listening. Harry whispered, barely moving his lips. Hogwarts reacts to my scar. The ink symbol pulsed once. Harry felt the message go, like a pebble dropped into deep water. Then he sat back, heart pounding, and stared at his wand. A blade. Useful. Dangerous. And not the thing that defined him. Across the room, Hermione's voice drifted in his memory. We measure before we touch. Harry closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he would begin measuring Hogwarts secrets. And if he was right, if the castle really did recognize the scar as a latch, then Voldemort wasn't just somewhere out there. He was already threaded into the places Harry stood. The first sign that Hogwarts had decided Harry was a problem wasn't a teacher. It was a staircase. Harry was halfway up to the second floor when the steps beneath his feet shuddered, re-angled, and tried politely but firmly to send him somewhere else. Not today, Harry muttered, and pressed his thumb to the underside of his ink. He didn't fight the staircase. He didn't force it. He simply drew a tiny refusal glyph with his thumb against the wood, so small no one would notice, and breathed out a single steady truth. I'm going where I'm going. The staircase hesitated. Then, begrudgingly, settled back into the direction he wanted. Hermione, walking beside him with a stack of books taller than her face, stared. You just negotiated with the staircase, she said, half horrified, half impressed. Harry kept walking. It's a castle. It thinks it's clever. Hermione huffed. It is clever. Harry glanced at her. So am I. Hermione's mouth twitched like she was trying not to smile. And that was when Professor Quirrell found them. He didn't appear suddenly like Dumbledore or silently like Snape. He approached like a man who wanted to be noticed as harmless. I am Miss Granger, Quirrell stammered, clutching his turban like it was keeping him from floating away. A moment, if you please. Hermione froze. Professor? Quirrell's eyes slid to Harry too quickly, too precisely. Harry felt his scar prickle. Not pain. Recognition. The knot stirred like a snake lifting its head. Harry's fingers slid beneath his collar and brushed the refusal seal. Warm. Ready. Quirrell smiled nervously. Mr. Potter, see, could you stay too? Harry's stomach tightened. Hermione whispered, what does he want? Harry didn't answer, because the truth was he already knew. Quirrell wanted to see what was inside the scar, to test whether Harry was a door. Quirrell led them into an empty classroom that smelled like chalk and old spell smoke. The door clicked shut behind them. No one else. Harry's pulse quickened. Horry's voice, years old in his memory. Don't go alone. Harry had Hermione. That counted. Quirrell paced near the teacher's desk, his stutter thickening like a costume. I wanted to ask about your background, Mr. Potter. Harry stayed calm. Background. Quirrell nodded rapidly. Igriagis. You've been away from our world. I'm as simply curious how you learned such excellent control. Harry didn't like the word curious in Quirrell's mouth. Curiosity was a hook. Harry answered with the safest truth he could fit into a small sentence. I learned rules first, he said. Quirrell's smile trembled. Rules, he repeated, like the concept offended him. How quaint. Hermione frowned. Rules are important. Quirrell's eyes flicked to her, then back to Harry like Hermione was a minor inconvenience. And do your rules involve your scar? Quirrell asked too casually. Harry's scar prickled harder. Hermione stiffened. Professor. Quirrell cut her off with a shake of his head. No harm, no harm. It's merely fascinating. Such a famous mark. Harry's fingers curled around the ink beneath his shirt. The knot pulsed, eager. Quirrell took a step closer. Too close. Harry felt it, an invisible probing, a thread of intent reaching for the scar like fingers reaching for a latch. Harry didn't back away. He didn't flinch. He spoke a truth that was also a boundary. No. The refusal seal warmed sharply. The air between Harry and Quirrell tightened like a stretched string. Quirrell's hand jerked back as if he'd touched a hot kettle. His eyes widened real fear, not fake stammering. For half a second, the shadow behind him writhed. Harry saw it again, clearer this time. A second face in the wrong place. A presence pressed too close to the back of Quirrell's skull. Hungry. Quirrell swallowed, struggling to recover the stutter. As such, unusual magic. Harry's voice stayed steady. Don't touch me. Hermione's eyes were wide now, fully alert. Professor, what are you doing? Quirrell blinked fast, then forced a shaky laugh. Oh, and nothing. Nothing at all. But Harry could feel it. The shadow behind Quirrell wasn't laughing. It was measuring. Quirrell stepped back quickly, suddenly eager to end the meeting. Go on, then. Off you go. Be back to your studies. Harry didn't move immediately. He watched Quirrell's face like a spirit judge would. Quirrell couldn't meet his eyes. That was answer enough. Harry turned and left with Hermione beside him, heart pounding. Only when they were out in the corridor did Hermione whisper that was not normal. Harry swallowed. No. Hermione's voice went tight. You tried what read your scar? Harry nodded once. Hermione's eyes hardened. We tell a teacher. Harry's scar prickled warning. His mind flashed to Dumbledore's gentle voice and Snape's icy stare. Avez chose caution. Not yet, he said. Hermione looked like she wanted to argue. Harry added, quietly, if we accuse him without proof, it becomes politics. And politics eats children. Hermione's face twisted. You talk like an adult. Harry's mouth went flat. I was raised by people who hate wasted time. Hermione stared at him, then nodded sharply. Fine. Then we collect proof. Harry exhaled. The knot shifted annoyed. It didn't like proof. Proof made doors harder to open. Halloween, when fear becomes fuel. The troll came on Halloween. Because of course it did. Hogwarts loved dramatic timing like it was a hobby. The Great Hall was full of floating pumpkins, enchanted bats, and food that looked too cheerful to be trusted. Ron was arguing with nearly headless Nick. Hermione was correcting someone's pronunciation of a charm. Harry was trying to eat without feeling like the castle itself was watching him chew. Then Quirrell burst into the hall, pale and shaking. T-Troll, in the dungeons, he gasped and collapsed theatrically. Chaos exploded. Students screamed. Teachers shouted. Prefects herded children like panicked sheep. Harry stood up slowly, heart going cold. He felt it before anyone said Hermione's name. The absence. She wasn't at the table. Ron swore. Hermione. Harry's stomach dropped. She went to the bathroom, Ron said, face white. She was upset earlier she didn't know about the troll. Harry didn't hesitate. He and Ron slipped out with the crowd, then broke away into the corridor. Where's the girls' bathroom? Harry asked. Ron pointed, breathing hard. Second floor this way. They ran. And as they ran, Harry felt his scar prickling in a way that wasn't pain, but pressure like the knot was leaning forward to watch. It liked chaos. It liked fear. Fear made people sloppy. Sloppy made doors open. They reached the bathroom corridor and heard it. A heavy thump. A low, stupid growl. Ron's face went green. Oh no. Harry's fingers went to the pouch inside his robe, bless sand. Not much. Just enough for a few lines. He whispered, stay behind me. Ron blinked. What? Harry's voice hardened. Stay behind me. Ron hesitated, then nodded, gripping his wand like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. They pushed the door open. The troll filled the room like a mistake. Huge, gray, smelling like wet stone and old anger. It swung its club lazily, smashing sinks like they offended it personally. Hermione was backed against the wall, wand shaking, eyes wide with terror. When she saw Harry, her face flashed with relief, then fear again, because now he was here too. "Harry!" she shouted. The troll turned, its small eyes fixed on Harry's scar. And Harry felt the knot inside him stir like it recognized a fellow monster. Harry's stomach lurched, not because he agreed, because he understood the danger of recognition. He stepped forward anyway. Not fast was wandcraft. He moved like Hori had taught him. One step, then measure, then act. He dropped to one knee and poured sand onto the wet tile. The troll roared and lumbered closer. Ron shouted, "Wingardium Leviosa," like panic could power spells. The club wobbled a little, then dropped. Not enough. Hermione tried a charm. It splashed uselessly against the troll's thick hide. Harry traced two quick symbols in the sand. Refusal and bind simpler versions, meant to hold for seconds, not hours. He spoke one steady truth through clenched teeth. Not here. The sand glyphs flared faintly. The air in front of Harry tightened. The troll swung its club at him. The club hit the invisible boundary and jolted sideways, slamming into a wall instead. Stone cracked. Dust fell. Harry's ward shook, lines thinning too much force, too fast. Harry's heartbeat spiked. The knot surged. It wanted him to get angry. Anger was fuel. Anger was a lever. Harry felt it like a hand on his spine, urging. More. Harder. Break it. Harry's scar burned. For a heartbeat, the bathroom lights flickered. Isfit crawled up his throat like smoke. Ron shouted, "Harry!" Hermione's voice cut through terror, sharp and intelligent. "Your lines, they're breaking." Harry stared at the sand lines thin, shaking, about to collapse. He could save it by pouring more power in, by using anger, by letting the knot's hunger become his strength. The thought tasted sweet and awful. Harry forced a breath. He remembered the Hall of Measures. He remembered Nefert's cold voice, "Speed feeds Isfit." He remembered Hori's rough voice, "Walls hold longer than fists." Harry chose a different truth. "Now I'm angry. Now I want to win." A calm, brutal truth. "I don't need to break you," Harry whispered. "I only need to hold you." The burn eased just a little. He drew one more symbol in the sand with trembling fingers. Measure. The ward didn't get stronger. It got cleaner. The boundary stopped shaking. The troll roared and tried again, thunk its club, skidded off the field like it had struck slick glass. The troll stumbled. That stumble was the opening wandcraft liked. Harry snapped his head toward Ron. "Now." Ron blinked. "Now what?" Harry pointed at the club on the floor. "Lift it." Ron's eyes widened with sudden understanding. He raised his wand with both hands, face twisted with focus. "Wingardium Leviosa." This time the club rose. Higher. Higher. Because the troll was constrained. Because its space was controlled. Harry's wall gave Ron's blade time. Ron's voice cracked as he shouted, and dropped. The club slammed down onto the troll's head. Not gory, not splattering. Just enough. The troll swayed, eyes crossing, then collapsed like a mountain giving up. Silence flooded the bathroom. Harry's ward lines faded in the sand like they'd never existed. Hermione slid down the wall, breathing hard. Ron stared at the unconscious troll, then at Harry. That was. Harry didn't let himself feel triumphant, because he could still feel it. The knot inside him was thrumming. It had enjoyed the moment when anger almost won. Harry's hands shook slightly. Hermione noticed immediately. "You're cold," she whispered. Harry swallowed. "That's Isfit." Ron blinked. "Bless you?" Hermione shot him a look. "Not that kind of Harry, what do you mean?" Harry stared at his palms. "Chaos backlash. If I'd used anger, I could have smashed it. but then the chaos sticks to me. Hermione's face went pale. So you stopped yourself. Harry nodded once. Ron swallowed. Good, because you looked scary for a second. Harry's scar prickled, like the not enjoyed being called scary. Harry pressed his fingers to the ink, grounding himself. Footsteps thundered in the corridor teachers. They barely had time to drag the Trolls Club aside and pretend they'd only stumbled upon the situation when Professor McGonagall burst in, followed by Snape and Quirrell. McGonagall's eyes locked onto the troll, then snapped to the three kids. What on earth? Snape's gaze went to Harry's face, then narrowed like he was trying to see through skin. Quirrell stood at the back, hands trembling. But Harry watched his eyes. Quirrell wasn't trembling with fear. He was trembling with anger. Because something had just happened in that bathroom that wasn't supposed to happen. Harry had proven he could hold chaos without becoming it. And the thing behind Quirrell hated that. Aftermath, a hook becomes a chain. Later, in the common room, long after the teachers had escorted them out and assigned attentions that felt more like cover stories, Hermione sat beside Harry with her knees pulled up, staring into the fire. Ron had gone upstairs, still half in shock. Hermione's voice was small. You saved us. Harry's throat tightened. We saved each other. Hermione shook her head. No, Harry. You could have lost control. Harry stared at the flames. Yes. Hermione swallowed. And you didn't. Harry didn't answer, because the truth was complicated. He didn't lose control, but he'd felt how easy it would be. How good it would feel to let the knot's hunger become his strength. That scared him more than the troll. Hermione leaned closer. Is that why, Quirrell? Harry's scar prickled. Hermione stopped. Okay. We don't say his name casually. Harry nodded once. Hermione's eyes narrowed. But he wanted the troll here, didn't he? Harry's stomach turned. I think so. Hermione whispered, to see what you would do. Harry stared at the fire. To see if I'm a door. Hermione's face hardened. Then we don't give him openings. Harry's fingers brushed the ink again. We measure. Hermione nodded. Then quietly she added, and we start with the third-floor corridor. Harry's scar prickled sharply, like the knot had heard the words and leaned forward eagerly. Harry's jaw tightened. We do it my way, he reminded her. Hermione's eyes stayed steady. Your way. The latch test. They went 2 nights later. Not alone. Ron insisted on coming after Hermione explained it was a hidden door situation because Ron's curiosity was allergic to being excluded. Harry brought his pouch of bless sand, a tiny bottle of black ink, and 1 portable seal, returned just in case. The corridor on the 3rd floor was colder than the rest of the castle. Not damp cold, not draft cold, ward cold, like the air had been told to stay alert. They walked slowly, wands out, not because Harry trusted wands, but because wands were what the castle expected to see. Harry's scar prickled as they approached the spot. Then the wall rippled. The seam appeared. A door that wasn't a door. Hermione inhaled sharply. Ron whispered, that's mental. Harry didn't move. He watched. He felt the way the seam responded to the scar's presence, not to Harry's emotions, not to his intent, just to the fact of the knot in him. Like it recognized a signature. Hermione whispered, it's reacting to you. Harry nodded once. And I hate it. Ron whispered, open it? Harry's eyes snapped to him. No. Ron flinched. Harry forced his voice down. We measure first. Hermione nodded, already pulling parchment from her robe. Okay, what do we measure? Harry knelt carefully away from the seam and poured sand in a thin ring on the stone floor. Just a ring. Not a trap. Non-attack. A boundary of observation. He traced 3 symbols. Measure refusal truth. Then he spoke a steady sentence, the way Nefrit would speak to the universe. Show what you are without inviting what you hide. The ring warmed faintly. The air around the seam clarified. and Harry felt it clean and cold. A protection keyed to wound magic, to soul damage, to a specific kind of form violence. The seam wasn't opening for Harry. It was opening for the thing inside him. Hermione whispered, horrified, "It's using your scar as authentication." Ron's face went white. That's gross. Harry swallowed, throat tight. Yes. And then, footsteps. Soft, careful. Someone watching from the far end of the corridor. Harry's head snapped up. Professor Quirrell stood in shadow, half hidden by armor suits, his face pale and eyes bright with something that wasn't fear. He hadn't followed them like a teacher catching kids out of bed. He'd followed them like a hunter watching bait approach a trap. Ah, Quirrell whispered. No estute, no trembling. Just a quiet satisfaction. Harry's scar burned. The knot surged like it wanted to leap forward and greet an old friend. Harry's stomach dropped. Hermione's breath caught. Professor. Quirrell smiled slightly. You're very predictable, children. Ron's wand shook. We were just. Quirrell's eyes never left Harry. Testing doors. Harry's voice stayed steady, even as his blood ran cold. Why is this door keyed to my scar? Quirrell's smile widened. The shadow behind him shifted excited. Because Quirrell said softly, some locks recognized the hand that broke them. Hermione whispered, Harry. Harry didn't step toward Quirrell. He didn't attack. He did what Horry would do. He built a wall. With one fast motion, Harry flicked sand out of his pouch in a thin line across the corridor, barely a handful. He traced a single symbol in the air with his fingertip, using the sand's momentum as ink. Refuse. Then he spoke a truth that tasted like iron. You do not touch my door. The air snapped tight between them. Quirrell's eyes widened as the field slammed in a place thin, but sharp. Not strong enough to trap Quirrell. Strong enough to interrupt. Quirrell stumbled a half step back, as if his intent had hit glass. The shadow behind him writhed in annoyance. Quirrell's smile faltered. Interesting. Harry's hands trembled slightly. He didn't have much sand. He didn't have time. His ward would hold seconds, not minutes. Hermione's voice was fierce. We're leaving. Ron nodded rapidly. Yep, brilliant plan. Leaving sounds great. Harry backed up slowly, keeping his gaze locked on Quirrell. Quirrell didn't chase. He didn't need to. He leaned forward slightly and said, softly, like poison poured into tea. You felt it, didn't you, Harry? The castle recognizes you. It wants you. It wants that beautiful wound inside you to open the right doors. Harry's scar burned. The knot pulsed, thrilled at being spoken to. Harry's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Quirrell's voice grew gentler, hook gentle. You could know everything, he whispered. You could understand your scar. You could stop being afraid of it. Hermione grabbed Harry's sleeve. Harry. Harry didn't answer Quirrell. He answered the knot. He pressed his fingers to the ink and whispered, so quietly only his own skin could hear. No sorcerers. Then he turned and ran. They sprinted back through shifting corridors, up staircases that tried to misdirect them, past suits of armor that seemed to watch. Behind them, Quirrell's presence faded. But Harry knew deep in his bones that this wasn't over. Because now Quirrell knew something important. Harry wouldn't open doors just because they existed. So the serpent would try a different crown. It would try to make Harry open the door for someone else. Or open it in anger. Or open it to save someone. And that was the cruelest hook of all. That night, Harry sat at his dorm desk and drew the tiny echo symbol under his trunk again. He whispered into it, breath shaky but controlled. He is here. He tried to use my scar as a key. The castle responds to the knot. The ink warmed. The message dropped into the invisible river path. Harry stared at the candle flame until his hands stopped shaking. Somewhere behind his scar, the door listened. And for the first time since arriving at Hogwarts, Harry understood the shape of the war ahead. Not wand duels. Not house points. Not fame. Locks. Keys. And the terrifying question of what would happen if the wrong hand turned him. The reply from the Nile arrived like a breath in a locked room. Harry was halfway through copying Charm's homework when the tiny star charm Sia had given him folded paper in his pocket warmed sharply against his leg. Not heat, not fire. A signal. Harry went still. Ron, sprawled on his bed with a comic book, didn't notice. If you're about to do that weird, silent thinking thing again, can you warn me first? Hermione looked up instantly. Of course she did. What is it? Harry slipped his hand into his pocket and pinched the charm between two fingers. The paper unfolded on its own. Not like origami coming apart, more like a flower opening when it recognizes sunlight. A thin line of ink appeared across it, written in a script that wasn't English and wasn't modern Arabic either. It was the House of Life's hand, precise, economical, sharp. Harry swallowed. Hermione leaned forward. Is that a message? Harry nodded once. He didn't like how much relief hit his chest. He didn't like needing it. But he did. He held the charm closer to the candle and read the glyphs. Then he translated softly, word by word, into English for Hermione and Ron. A door key to a wound is not a gift. It is either a cure room or a trap room. Measure the air. Bring honey. Bring salt. Dio not command what is old. Ask what it guards. That if it demands an oath, offer only Maya. That do not offer anger. And Ron stared. That's cheerful. Hermione's eyes were shining like she'd just been handed forbidden lab notes. Nefert wrote that? Harry nodded. Hermione pointed. Honey and salt. Offerings. Spirit etiquette. Harry's scar prickled faintly, like the knot didn't like the word etiquette. Etiquette meant rules. Rules meant less chaos. Ron rubbed the back of his neck. So, we're really going back? Harry looked at the message again. A cure room or a trap room. Quirrell had been waiting there like he owned the corridor. Harry's stomach tightened. We're going back, Harry said. Hermione didn't flinch. Your way. Ron sighed like a man being sentenced. Fine, your way. But if an ancient mummy grabs my ankle, I'm leaving both of you behind. Harry almost smiled. Almost. Research, but not the usual kind. Hermione tried the library first. Of course she did. She dragged them through stacks until the air smelled like paper dust and quiet judgment. She pulled books on Hogwarts architecture, Founders Era Awards, cursed vaults, even primitive magical systems, which made Harry's jaw clench hard enough to hurt. Most of it was useless. British texts talked about ancient magic like it was a charming ancestor, something quaint, something surpassed. Harry wanted to throw half the shelf into the fire. He didn't. No anger. No is fait. Finally, Hermione found a paragraph in a crumbling guide to obscure warding traditions of early Europe, and her finger froze on the page. Listen, she whispered. Harry leaned in. Some castles built atop Roman and pre-Roman sites incorporated foreign warding elements, particularly those involving sole measure rights imported through trade and conquest. One rare example is a scale chamber, described as tomb-like, but used for diagnosing spiritual contamination in the living. Hermione's eyes lifted. Scale chamber. Harry's scar prickled. Ron squinted. Spiritual contamination? Hermione swallowed. Like possession. Like what you sensed in Quirrell. Harry's throat tightened. Or like the knot. Hermione nodded slowly. So Hogwarts might have an old diagnostic chamber. Ron groaned. Great. A haunted hospital for souls. Harry kept reading the paragraph, and one line hit like a nail. Such chambers were keyed, not to bloodlines, but to wounds in the soul, allowing entry only to those marked. Harry's fingers went cold. Hermione whispered, That's why it reacts to your scar. Harry nodded once. It thinks I need to be measured. Ron frowned. Well, do you? Harry didn't answer. Because the truth was, yes, he did. honey, salt, and a promise. They stole the honey from breakfast. Ron did it with the casual confidence of someone who'd grown up in a house where 5 siblings could be blamed first. Hermione brought salt wrapped in parchment and a tiny vial of water just in case we need to activate any. She stopped herself and glanced at Harry. Your simple things. Harry packed blessed sand, ink, and one portable seal. Return. He also tucked the star charm message into his inner pocket like it was a spine. That night, they waited until the common room quieted, until the portrait's snores became steady and the castle settled into its nocturnal creaks. Harry's scar prickled the moment they stepped into the corridor outside Gryffindor Tower. The knot was awake, curious, hungry. Harry pressed 2 fingers to the ink under his shirt and breathed slowly until the hunger dulled. Hermione noticed. Is it bad? Harry shook his head. It's excited. Ron muttered, lovely. They moved through staircases that tried to mislead, through hallways that narrowed like the castle was testing their nerve. Once, a suit of armor turned its head to watch them. Hermione froze. Harry didn't. He traced a tiny mist glyph in the air, barely more than a breath, and let a thin veil soften their outlines. Not invisibility, just uncertain attention. The armor hesitated, then looked away like it wasn't sure what it'd seen. Ron mouthed, that is so unfair. Harry kept walking. At the 3rd-floor corridor, the air turned colder. Not draft cold, ward cold. A tightness behind the teeth, a quiet pressure in the bones. The seam appeared in the stone the moment Harry stepped close. A door pretending not to be a door. Ron swallowed audibly. It's doing it again. Hermione's voice was quiet, reverent. It recognizes you. Harry hated that. He knelt, poured a thin ring of sand same as last time, then traced. Measure truth refusal. He placed honey at the ring's edge. Then salt. Like Nefert's message. Like a hand offering peace before asking questions. Harry spoke softly, careful with each word. I want to open you like a thief. The seam pulsed faintly. Hermione whispered, it's listening. Harry continued, voice steady. I want to know what you guard. The stone wall rippled. Not violently. Like a curtain deciding to part. The door opened, and a breath of air slid out that did not smell like Hogwarts. It smelled like dry stone, old incense, and something colder than cold. Judgment. Ron's face went pale. That's not normal. Harry stood. Stay close. Hermione nodded. They stepped through. The door sealed behind them without a sound. The tomb, that wasn't a tomb. The corridor beyond was narrow and low, carved from stone that didn't match Hogwarts' usual blocks. The walls were etched with symbols, not runes, not Latin inscriptions. Hieroglyphs. Not modern tourist hieroglyphs. Not pretty. These were precise, functional, written like ward lines. Harry's breath caught. Hermione whispered, stunned, Harry, these look like. I know, Harry said. His scar prickled. The knot shivered. The corridor ended in a chamber that made Ron stop dead. The room looked like a tomb. A long stone floor. A raised platform at the far end. Columns carved with faded figures holding feathers and scales. A shallow groove in the center, like something had been meant to be placed there. But there were no sarcophagi. No bonus. No death. The chamber didn't feel dead. It felt like a courtroom. In the center of the room, carved into the floor, was a symbol Harry knew even without reading. A scale. One side feather. One side heart. Ma'at. Hermione whispered, this is Egyptian. Ron's voice cracked. Why is this under Hogwarts? Harry didn't answer, because his attention snapped to the far platform. Something stood there. A statue tall, black stone, shaped like a jackal-headed figure holding a staff. But the statue wasn't just stone. Its outline shimmered faintly, like a spirit wearing sculpture as clothing. And when Harry stepped forward, the jackal's eyes opened. Amber light. Not fire. Not spell glow. Presence. The air thickened. Harry's scar flared hot, and a knot surged like it wanted to bow. Harry clenched his jaw hard enough to hurt. No sorcerers. No anger. He stepped into the center of the scale, symbol, and bowed his head slightly, not submissive, not defiant. Respect. CIS lesson. He set the honey and salt on the floor before the statue. The amber eyes watched him. Then a voice filled the chamber. Not a sound through air. A meaning pressed directly into their bones. Why are you here, wounded one? Ron made a strangled sound. It's talking in my head. Hermione's eyes were wide, but she didn't panic. Harry, this is a guardian. Harry swallowed. Yes. He spoke aloud anyway, because speaking was also structure. I'm here to measure what's in my scar, Harry said, and to know what this chamber guards. The guardian's eyes flared slightly. You carry a foreign knot, a splinter of a serpent. Harry's stomach twisted. Hearing it named like that made it too real. Hermione whispered, serpent. Ron swallowed. Voldemort. Harry's scar burned. The knot pulsed furious at being recognized. The guardian's voice pressed harder. This place does not guard treasure. It guards balance. Harry forced steady breath. Then why does it open for me? The guardian's gaze bored into him. Because wounds seek scales. Because those who are contaminated must be measured. Because the castle remembers what it once learned from the river. Hermione's breath hitched. The founders. Harry's mind raced. Hogwarts connected to the Nile? To a House of Life tradition? The guardian continued. A child was brought here long ago. A child with a shadow in his blood. They built this chamber so he would not be used. Harry's chest went cold. Ron whispered, so they built this for you? Harry's voice came out rough. Or for someone like me. The guardian staff tapped the stone once. The sound wasn't loud, but it made the whole room agree. You ask what it guards that IT guard the law against the serpents. IT guard the knowledge that a soul can be cut into anchors. Hermione froze. Harry went completely still. Anchors. Ron frowned. Anchors? Hermione whispered, like pieces. Harry's throat tightened. The knot behind his scar felt suddenly colder, like it didn't like the word pieces. Harry forced the question out. You mean a soul can be split? Yes. The guardian pressed into them, and you carry one splinter. But the serpent's true body is not here. The serpent hides behind anchors. Hermione's voice trembled. Harry, that sounds like. I know, Harry whispered. He didn't say Horcrux. He didn't know the word yet. But he knew the shape. A soul nailed into objects. On night. More than one. Harry swallowed. Can this chamber remove it? The guardian's eyes burned brighter. Not without price. Harry's stomach dropped. What price? The guardian's staff angled toward the scale symbol under Harry's feet. An oath. Hermione tensed. What kind of oath? The guardian's meaning pressed like weight. Emayat does not let you cut souls for pride. That Emayat does not let you unmake life for vengeance. If you seek to sever the serpent's art, you must swear this. The air thickened, and Harry felt that this wasn't a suggestion. This was the chamber's law, a binding that would shape what he could do in the future. The guardian continued. You will not unmake a soul unjustly, that you will not sever for anger, that you will seek balance before victory. And if you break this, your own thread will be weighed. Ron whispered, terrified, that sounds permanent. Hermione's eyes were locked on Harry. You don't have to. Harry's scar burned like a brand. The knot surged, panicked, like it knew an oath would tighten the cage. Harry swallowed hard. He could refuse. He could walk out, pretend he hadn't learned this. But then Quirrell would still be out there, probing his scar, chasing the key. And Harry would still be a latch without a lock. Nefert's message echoed in his mind. If it demands an oath, offer only Ma'at. Do not offer anger. Harry lifted his chin. He spoke slowly, like he was laying stone blocks in his own spine. I swear by Ma'at, Harry said. I will not sever a soul unjustly. I will not unmake life for pride or vengeance. I will seek balance. His voice shook slightly on the last word, but it held. The chamber responded. The scale symbol beneath his feet warmed. Not heat agreement. The Guardian's amber eyes softened by the smallest fraction still judge, but now judge that had accepted jurisdiction. Hermione exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. Ron whispered, "Blimey." Harry's scar pulsed sharply, then eased. Not healed, not removed, but contained, like a door that had been given a better lock. The knot inside him writhed, furious, then fell into a tense silence. The Guardian staff tapped once more. Then you may see. The far platform shimmered, and a stone panel slid aside with a grinding whisper. Inside was not gold, not jewels, not a weapon. A thin slate tablet rested in the niche, etched with a map of lines, threads that intersected and knotted like woven hair. Harry stared. He didn't fully understand it, but he could feel what it represented. A diagram of soul threads, a schematic of knots and anchors, a language for what lived in his scar. Hermione whispered, "Odd, that's theory, actual theory." The Guardian pressed meaning into them again. The serpent made many knots that you carry one. Free yourself. You must learn the whole weave, and you must not let the serpent use you as a key again. Harry swallowed. How? The Guardian's amber eyes burned. Do not open what calls to your wound, that open what you choose with law. Harry nodded slowly. He stepped forward, careful, and lifted the slate tablet. The moment his fingers touched it, images flickered behind his eyes. Not memories. Warnings. A man's face without a nose. A snake's laugh. Objects hidden in darkness. A ring. A cup. A diary. A locket. A crown. Harry stumbled. Hermione caught his arm. Harry. Harry blinked hard, breathing fast. I saw things. Ron's face went white. Like what? Harry's voice came out rough. Like anchors. Hermione's eyes sharpened. Multiple. Harry nodded once. The Guardian's voice pressed one last time. Leave that the serpent's host walks above you. He will feel this chamber shift. Harry's stomach dropped. Quirrell. Hermione's grip tightened. We have to go. Ron didn't argue for once. Yep. Leaving. Love leaving. Harry tucked the slate tablet under his robe. He bowed once to the Guardian, because respect mattered. Thank you, he said. The Guardian's eyes dimmed slightly. Do not thank me, keep your oath. The stone wall rippled behind them. The door reappeared. They stepped through, and the corridor's cold snapped back in a Hogwarts' ordinary damp chill. The seam closed behind them like it had never existed. Above the tomb, they didn't make it far before Harry's scar prickled sharply. Not door pressure. Not hunger. A different sensation. Being watched. Harry froze in the shadow of a tapestry. Hermione and Ron pressed in close. Down the corridor, a figure moved, limping slightly, wrapped in a professor's robes. Quirrell. He didn't look at them, but Harry felt it anyway, the shadow behind him stirring, sensing something had changed. As Quirrell passed the spot where the seam had been, his steps faltered. His head tilted slightly, like a snake tasting air. Then Quirrell hurried on, breath shallow, one hand clutching his turban. Hermione whispered he felt it. Harry's fingers tightened on the ankh. Yes. Ron swallowed. So now what? Harry looked down at the slate tablet hidden under his robe. He didn't have a vocabulary yet. He didn't have all the pieces. But he had something huge. proof that the thing in his scar wasn't a lone accident. It was part of a system. And Hogwarts itself had been built with that system in mind. Harry whispered, "Now we learn what the serpent did." Hermione nodded, "Fierce. And we stop Quirrell from using you as a key." Ron muttered, "And we don't die. Add that to the plan." Harry almost smiled again. Almost. But the smile faded quickly because deep behind his scar, the knot sat in silence. Tight, resentful, and very, very aware that the lock had just gotten stronger. Harry didn't sleep much after the scale chamber. Not because he was afraid of nightmares, though there were plenty. Because the castle felt different now. Like Hogwarts had noticed he'd stepped into one of its oldest ribs, and it didn't know whether to welcome him or swallow him. And under his scar, the knot had gone quiet in a way that was worse than loud. Quiet meant planning. The slate that didn't want to be read. They hid the slate in the safest place they could think of. Inside Harry's trunk, under the false bottom Hermione had charmed to look like normal wood. Ron watched, pale. "If that thing starts whispering, I'm moving beds." "It won't whisper," Hermione said sharply, already pulling out parchment and a quill. "It's not sentient." Harry didn't correct her. Because the slate did have a presence, just not the kind that talked. It was like holding a map drawn with pressure instead of ink. Harry could feel lines beneath the lines. The language of knots. The language of anchors. Hermione spread her notes out on the floor by Harry's bed. "Okay, we do this properly. You translate the hieroglyphs you can. I map the diagram into something we can test." Ron. Ron blinked. "Me?" Hermione sighed. "You. Tell us if either of us starts being stupid." Ron looked deeply offended. "That's a full-time job." Harry almost smiled. Almost. Harry set the slate between them. The moment he touched it, his scar prickled faintly like the knot didn't like being studied. He pressed his fingers to the ink under his shirt and breathed slow. "No shortcuts," he whispered. Hermione didn't ask who he was talking to. She just nodded like that made sense. Harry traced the first set of symbols etched near the top edge. "They're not decorative," he murmured. "They're instructions." Hermione leaned in. "Read them." Harry swallowed and translated as carefully as he could. "Wound seeks scale. Scale seeks truth. Truth burns corruption. Corruption hides in anchors." Hermione's quill scratched so fast it sounded angry. Ron frowned. "Anchors again." Harry nodded. "It keeps saying it." Hermione flipped to a clean parchment and drew a quick diagram circles connected by threads, with small knots at the intersections. "This part," she said, tapping the slate's web-like pattern, "isn't random. It's a model." Harry stared at it. A model of a soul. Ron's face scrunched. "Souls have diagrams?" Hermione shot him a look. "Everything has structure, Ron." Harry's scar prickled, then eased as he focused. On the slate, one thread was darker than the others, etched deeper, almost angry. "That one," Harry said quietly. "That's the serpent." Hermione followed his finger, and these smaller knots branching off it. Harry's throat tightened. "Anchors." Ron went pale. So Voldemort didn't just die and come back. He scattered himself. Hermione's face looked like she'd swallowed ice. "It's worse than a ghost. It's engineering." Harry's hand curled around the edge of the slate until his knuckles went white. Because the most terrifying part wasn't the idea of splitting a soul. It was that someone had done it on purpose, repeatedly, with planning. That wasn't madness. That was intent. And intent was always more dangerous than chaos. Power levels. Why Harry couldn't just fix it. Hermione, relentlessly practical, asked the question that made Harry's stomach twist. "So can you remove it?" she said, looking at his scar like it was a math problem. Ron flinched. "Hermione." "What?" Hermione snapped. "If there's a chamber that can measure it, and a slate that maps it, maybe there's a process." Harry's scar prickled. The knot listened. Harry forced himself to answer honestly. "Not yet." Hermione's eyes narrowed. Why? Harry took a slow breath. Because Hecka isn't wand magic. Ron frowned. Magic is magic. Harry shook his head. Wand magic is fast. You point, you say the words, it moves. Hermione nodded cautiously. A channel. Yeah, Harry said. Like a blade. Quick, sharp, but it relies on flow. If the flow is blocked, it fails. He tapped the slate lightly. Hecka is architecture. You don't blast. You build. You set rules into space so the world agrees with you. Hermione's eyes softened with understanding. So it takes time. And materials, Harry added. He held up his ink tin and sand pouch. Ink holds law. Sand holds shape. Without them, I can still do some things missed, small refusals, but anything big needs structure. Ron made a face. So you can't just blast Voldemort's soul shard out of your head. Harry's jaw tightened. No. Hermione's voice went quieter. And even if you could, would your oath let you? Harry felt the oath like a weight in his chest. Only if it's just, he said. Only if it restores balance. If I try to cut it out because I'm angry, it becomes Isfit, and Isfit sticks. Hermione nodded slowly. So we don't fight it with rage. Ron muttered, great. So we fight it with homework. Harry almost laughed. Almost. But his scar prickled again, and the humor died. Because the knot wanted rage. And Hogwarts was full of things designed to create it. The name they didn't teach first years. Hermione did what Hermione always did when something didn't have a word. She went hunting for one. The next day, she dragged them back to the library, eyes bright with determination. We need vocabulary, she said, if British magic has a name for this. It does, Harry said quietly, and Hermione froze. How do you know? Harry's scar prickled with a memory he didn't fully own. Quirrell's hungry interest, the Guardian's cold certainty, the slate's diagram. Because it's not new, Harry said, and this school loves naming old horrors. Hermione's jaw set. Then we need the restricted section. Ron groaned like the universe itself was unfair. Do we? Do we really? Hermione ignored him. We need a sign note. Ron blinked. From who? Hermione's eyes darted through possibilities like chess moves. Flitwick might. No, Harry said. Hermione frowned. Why? Harry kept his voice steady. Teachers become politics. Politics eats children. Hermione's mouth tightened, but she didn't argue this time. She simply said, then how? Harry stared at the restricted section gate. Chains, wards, and Madame Pance's hawk eyes. He could have used mist. He could have softened attention. But the House of Life didn't teach theft. It taught asking old things properly. Harry's fingers brushed the ink. Come, he said. He led them to a quiet corner near the back shelves where no one lingered. He poured the tiniest pinch of salt into his palm and touched it to the floor, tracing a symbol so small Hermione barely saw it. Is that she whispered. A request, Harry murmured. He placed a single drop of honey on the symbol and breathed out one steady sentence. I seek knowledge to prevent corruption. The air shifted. Not dramatically, just a soft loosening like a door that hadn't been visible decided to become visible. Hermione's eyes widened. Harry, what did you? Library spirits, Harry whispered. Every old place has watchers. Hogwarts just pretends it doesn't. Ron looked around nervously. I hate this school. Harry didn't laugh. Because he felt it now, something unseen paying attention. A presence that wasn't Quirrell. Something older, quieter. The chain ward at the restricted section didn't unlock. But the space beside it softened. A thin gap appeared not big enough for a person, just big enough for a book to slide through. Hermione stared. That's... Maat, Harry said. Not stealing. Borrowing. Ron stared at the gap like it was a mouth. Borrowing without asking permission sounds like stealing. Harry glanced at him. We did ask. Hermione swallowed, then leaned forward, careful. So, we can request a specific book? Harry nodded once. If the library agrees, it's necessary. Hermione's eyes gleamed. Okay, okay. Then, she whispered the title like she was offering a sacrifice. Secrets of the Darkest Art. Ron made a strangled sound. Hermione. Hermione ignored him. If there's anything about soul splitting, it'll be in there. Harry's scar prickled sharp. The knot tensed. The air tightened like the library itself disliked the request. Harry held his breath, keeping his mind calm. No anger. No hunger. Only purpose. Finally, the gap widened just enough, and a book slid out heavy, black leather, edges worn like they'd been touched by too many guilty hands. Hermione caught it like it might bite. It felt like it did. They carried it to a table far from Madame Pance's line of sight, though Harry suspected that didn't matter anymore. Old things didn't need eyes. Hermione opened the book. The pages smelled like dust and wrongness. She flipped through until she found a chapter heading that made her go still. Horcruxes. Hermione's voice went quiet. That's the word. Ron leaned in, pale. What does it say? Hermione read, voice trembling just slightly. A Horcrux is an object used to anchor a fragmented soul created through murder. Ron recoiled. Murder? Harry's scar burned faintly, as if the knot enjoyed hearing its origins spoken aloud. Hermione kept reading. Faster now. Try to outrun the horror. It says the soul is split by killing, and the fragment is sealed into an object by dark ritual. As long as the Horcrux exists, the wizard her voice caught can't truly die. Ron's face went white. So Voldemort can't. Not normally, Harry finished, voice flat. Hermione's eyes darted to another paragraph. It says, destroying a Horcrux destroys the fragment. But she swallowed. It warns it can damage the destroyer if done recklessly. Harry's oath pressed against his chest like a firm hand. Balance, he whispered. Hermione nodded, breathing hard. Yes, and it says something else. She read, Horcruxes are rare because creating one damages the soul, and because most wizards cannot endure being divided. Ron whispered, sick, he did it anyway. Harry stared at the page, jaw clenched. He didn't just endure it. He chose it. Hermione flipped again, searching. How many can be made? The book didn't give a clean number. It only said multiple excessive division risks instability, and some Sikh symbolic numerology. Hermione's eyes lifted, sharp with fear. 7 is a powerful magical number. Harry's scar prickled like a snake tasting blood. Harry pressed 2 fingers to the ink. Don't guess. Hermione nodded, swallowing. Right. No guessing. Ron muttered, I'm guessing it's too many. Harry almost smiled again. Almost. The stone, the most obvious hook in the school. They returned the book the way they borrowed it. Honey, salt, and a careful promise. Then they walked out of the library like ordinary kids. Except Harry's mind was no longer ordinary. Because now the war had a shape. Horcruxes. Anchors. Not work. And if Voldemort couldn't die while anchors existed, then the Philosopher's Stone wasn't just a treasure. It was a solution. A way to rebuild what he'd lost. They didn't need to guess. Hogwarts had been shouting the answer since the first week. A 3-headed dog. A trapdoor. Teachers guarding something. Harry stopped in the corridor outside Charm's class as 2 professors passed by, voices low. Flammel would never let it fall into the wrong hands, said one voice. That's why it's here, came another Snape's, cold and sharp. And that's why he will try. Harry froze. Hermione's hand shot out and grabbed his sleeve, pulling him into the shadow of a suit of armor. Ron whispered, did he just say? Flammel, Hermione breathed. Nicholas Flammel. Harry's scar prickled. Hermione's eyes went wide with sudden, academic terror. He's real. He's the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone. Ron stared. You know that? Hermione glared. I read. Harry's voice went low. Then the stone is here. Hermione nodded, breath fast. And if Voldemort gets it. He get a body, Harry finished. And then everything about Quirrell made even more sense. Quirrell wasn't just sniffing around Harry's scar for fun. He was trying to open the scale chamber because it was keyed to wound magic, because it knew how to recognize anchors, because it could diagnose contamination, because it could help him map the weave. Harry's stomach turned cold. "He wants my scar," Harry whispered. "Not just to hurt me, to use me." Hermione's voice went fierce. "Then we stop him." Ron swallowed. "How?" Harry's eyes narrowed, mind already building walls. "We guard the guards," Harry said. Hermione blinked. "What?" Harry pointed back toward the third-floor corridor. "The teachers built obstacles. Quirrell is testing them. He's trying to find the path." Hermione's eyes sharpened. "So we measure each obstacle and reinforce what we can." Ron stared. "You're talking like we can fight teachers' protection." Harry's voice stayed steady. "We're not fighting it. We're making it harder to misuse." Hermione nodded slowly, "Like adding anchors of your own." Harry touched the ink. "Exactly. Quirrell's second crown, temptation." Quirrell didn't confront Harry again directly after the corridor. Instead, he changed tactics. He started being helpful. In defense against the dark arts, he began watching Harry the way a teacher watches a gifted student. He praised him, softly, in private. He offered extra reading. He asked gentle questions. And every time he did, Harry felt the knot stir with a sick kind of pleasure. Attention. Validation. The hook of being understood. Nefert's rule whispered in Harry's mind. Kindness can be a hook too. One afternoon, Quirrell caught Harry after class when Hermione had been delayed by Flitwick. Quirrell smiled small, careful. "Mr. Potter, a moment." Harry's scar prickled. Harry stayed still. "Professor." Quirrell leaned closer, voice low. "I know what you found under the castle." Harry's blood went cold. Quirrell's smile widened slightly. "Don't look surprised. The castle whispers." Harry's fingers brushed the ink. Quirrell's eyes flicked to Harry's chest. "Ah, a charm. Not a wand focus. Interesting." Harry kept his voice calm. "What do you want?" Quirrell's stutter returned thin, theatrical. "Only to help. You have questions. I have experience." Harry's scar burned faintly. The knot leaned forward like it wanted to hear. Quirrell's voice softened. "You don't have to be afraid of what's inside you, Harry. You can understand it. Control it." Harry's jaw clenched. "Control," he repeated softly. The knot pulsed hungry. Quirrell smiled like he'd found the right word. "Yes, you're wasted in a child's school. You were raised elsewhere. You have discipline, structure." Harry stared at him, heart pounding. Quirrell was describing the house of life like it was a weapon rack. Quirrell continued, "If you want answers, meet me tonight. Third floor. You know the place." Harry's scar burned sharply. The knot surged. It wanted to go. It wanted to open. It wanted to prove something. Harry swallowed, breath slow. "Truth. My. No anger." Harry's voice came out calm as stone. "No." Quirrell blinked. The smile faltered. Harry held his gaze. "You don't get to invite yourself into my wound." For one heartbeat, the shadow behind Quirrell writhed furious. Quirrell's face twitched. Then he forced the smile back on like a mask. "Very well," he whispered. "Another time." He turned and walked away. But Harry felt at the satisfaction in the air, like Quirrell had gotten what he wanted anyway. Not Harry's obedience. Harry's attention. A hook doesn't need to pull you immediately. It only needs to stay in your skin. Harry exhaled slowly, fingers tight on the ink until the burn eased. The day Dumbledore left. That night, Harry told Hermione and Ron everything. Hermione went pale. Ron went furious. "We tell McGonagall," Hermione insisted. Harry shook his head. "And then what?" "They watch him. He plays innocent. He hides. He waits." Hermione's jaw clenched. "So we wait." Harry stared at the slate in his trunk. "No," he said. "We prepare." And then The very next day, Hogwarts gave them the worst possible timing. It happened at breakfast. An owl swooped into the Great Hall and dropped a letter into Dumbledore's hands. Dumbledore read it, and for the first time, Harry saw his expression sharpen into something serious. Not gentle, not twinkling, alarmed. Dumbledore rose. The Great Hall quieted instinctively. "I must leave the school for a short while," he announced, voice calm but firm. "Please continue your studies and behave responsibly." Harry's stomach dropped. Hermione's eyes widened, locking on Harry. Ron whispered, "That's bad." Harry's scar prickled like a warning bell. Because if Dumbledore, the strongest adult in this place, was leaving, then Quirrell's timing wasn't accidental. Harry felt it in his bones. The serpent was moving, and the castle, clever, shifting, proud, would not protect the stone on its own. Not from someone willing to use children as keys. Hermione's voice came out tight. "Harry, the stone." Harry nodded once, heart hammering, mind already building walls and routes and measures. Ron swallowed. "So tonight?" Harry stared at the staff table. Snape's eyes were narrowed, suspicious, as if he'd smelled something wrong too. Quirrell sat hunched, hands clasped, looking weak. But Harry could feel the shadow behind him like a smile. Harry's fingers curled around the ink under his shirt. "No anger," he whispered to himself. Then, louder, to Hermione and Ron, voice steady as a ward line. "Tonight." They didn't announce it. They didn't brag. They didn't do the Hogwarts thing where saving the world came with dramatic speeches and excellent lighting. They simply waited until night, until the common room dimmed, until Ron's brother's stories stopped being funny, until Hermione's hand stopped trembling long enough to hold her wand steady. Harry sat at the edge of his bed and laid out his tools like Horry had taught him. Not scattered, not frantic. A pinch of blessed sand at a strip of refusal seal at a strip of return seal. Black ink, green ink, the ink focus warm against his palm. Hermione watched him quietly. "You're acting like you've done this before." Harry's mouth went tight. "Not this." Ron swallowed. "I have. In my nightmares." Harry looked up at them, his two allies in a castle that loved turning children into stories. "Rules," he said. Hermione nodded instantly. Ron sighed but nodded too. Harry laid them down like ward stones. 1. We don't chase. We move only when we see the path. Point 2. If I say leave, you leave. Point 3. If my scar burns, we don't push through. We retreat. Point 4. We do not split up. Ever. Point 5. We don't let him talk us into anything. Ron raised a hand. "Can I add one?" Harry blinked. "Yes." Ron said grimly. 6. If I die, tell my mom I died bravely. Hermione smacked his arm. "You're not dying." Ron rubbed his arm. "I'm just preparing." Harry exhaled, something almost like a laugh caught in his chest and dissolved. Then they left. The third floor, the door that wanted him. The corridor was colder than ever. Harry's scar prickled before they even reached the wall. The knot inside him was awake, and Hogwarts recognized the signature like a guard dog recognizing a scent. The seam appeared. The door waited. Harry hated it. He knelt and poured a thin ring of sand the way he always did, measured, steady. He placed a smear of honey and a few grains of salt. Then he whispered Ma'at. The air tightened agreement. Hermione held her wand ready. Ron held his like it was a sword, and he'd been told swords were fashionable. Harry didn't touch the door. He didn't open it. He did something else. He traced a symbol just beside the seam, not on it. Refusal. Then he spoke a truth. "You open because you recognize my wound. I do not consent to being used." The seam hesitated. For a heartbeat, Harry felt the door try to pull like a hook behind his scar, tugging him forward. The knot surged, eager. Harry pressed the ink to his chest and breathed. "I choose," he whispered. The door opened. Not because Hogwarts wanted it. Because Harry's law forced the opening to be his act, not the scars. Hermione's eyes widened. You made it ask permission. Harry didn't answer, because the permission hadn't been asked by Hogwarts. It had been demanded by Myatt. They stepped through, Fluffy and the first trap. The corridor beyond led to the trapdoor room. Fluffy, the three-headed dog, lay there like a mountain of fur and teeth, its heads dozing in uneasy rhythm. Ron's face went green. It's real. Hermione whispered, it's guarding the trapdoor. Harry smelled the dog and smelled something else beneath. Enchantment woven with lullaby logic. Music. Do we have a flute? Ron whispered desperately. Hermione hissed. No. Harry stared at the dog. British magic loved quick solutions. Charm, trick, bypass. House of Life magic loved structure. Harry pulled out his ink tin. Ron blinked. Now. Harry dipped his finger in black ink and traced a simple symbol on the stone threshold just inside the doorway. Sleep. Not command sleep. Agreement sleep. He whispered a truth that felt almost ridiculous in English, but perfectly stable in the old tongue. You're tired. The symbol darkened. The air softened. Fluffy's breathing deepened. One head sighed. Then another. The third head stopped twitching. It wasn't knocked out. It was convinced. Hermione stared. That's suggestive magic, Harry murmured. Miss for the mind. They moved quickly, stepping around the dog's massive paws. Ron nearly tripped over a tail and grabbed Hermione's sleeve to stay upright. At the trapdoor, Hermione's hands shook as she lifted it. Darkness yawned below. Ron whispered, "This is the worst hole I've ever seen." Harry looked down and felt his scar prickle hard. Not from the fall, from what waited below. A pressure like old wards and older hunger. Harry swallowed and pressed the refusal seal under his collarbone. Warm, steady. Go, Harry said. They dropped. Devil's snare, the castle's grip. They landed in soft darkness that immediately tried to strangle them. Devil's snare wrapped around their ankles and wrists, tightening like a living trap. Ron panicked. It's got me. Hermione's voice went sharp. Don't struggle. Harry didn't fight it. He measured it. Devil's snare was fear-fed. Struggle strengthened it. Harry's scar prickled, not approval, eager for panic. Harry exhaled slowly. No anger, he whispered. He pulled a pinch of sand from his pouch and let it fall in a thin spiral over the vines. Light. Not fire. Not explosion. Light as law. He spoke the truth. You are in the sun. The vines loosened like fingers, unclenching. Hermione gasped, freed. Ron scrambled upright, panting. How do you keep doing that? Harry's voice was flat, because plants believe what they're made to believe. Hermione blinked, then nodded like that made horrifying sense. They hurried on. Keys and wind, blade versus wall. The flying keys room was chaos, hundreds of enchanted keys spinning in wild loops. Hermione looked up, calculating. We have to catch the right one. Ron groaned. I hate puzzles. Harry's scar prickled faintly. British magic puzzles always assumed wand speed reflexes. Harry didn't have that kind of upbringing, so he didn't try to match speed. He changed the room's rules. He dipped his finger in ink and traced a symbol on the floor near the doorframe. Still. Then he spoke. Air, be honest. The wind in the room steadied. Not stopped, Hogwarts wouldn't allow that. But the currents became clean, predictable. The keys' loops tightened into patterns. Hermione's eyes widened. You reduced turbulence. Harry nodded once. Now we can see. Hermione scanned the keys and pointed. That one bent wing. Ron lunged, grabbed it, yelped as it bit him, and shoved it into the lock. The door clicked open. Harry didn't celebrate. He could feel time. He could feel a presence moving somewhere below. Quirrell, or what were Quirrell was descending to. Chess, Ron's moment of Myatt. The giant chessboard was waiting like fate with a smirk. Pieces taller than them. Cold stone faces. The sense that the board didn't care who it crushed as long as the game was obeyed. Ron went pale. Oh, Hermione whispered, "You're good at chess." Ron swallowed. Yeah, usually when the pieces don't murder me. Harry's scar prickled sharply. But not like this. It liked sacrifice. It liked the idea of someone being forced to choose pain for a win. Harry pressed his fingers to the ink until the prickling eased. Ron stepped forward anyway, jaw tight. I'll do it. Hermione grabbed his sleeve. Ron. Ron looked at her, scared but stubborn. If we don't get through. Harry stared at Ron. In a house of life, oaths mattered because they were chosen, not demanded. Ron was choosing. That made it cleaner. Then we follow your moves, Harry said. Ron nodded once, swallowing fear like it was bitter potion. They became chess pieces. The game began. The board moved with crushing certainty. Stone met stone. Pieces shattered. Ron guided them through with shaking precision, eyes darting, thinking 3 steps ahead like it was the only way to stay alive. Then it came inevitable. Ron's face went white. I have to. Hermione's voice cracked. No. Ron swallowed hard. Yes, it's the only way. He stepped into position as a knight, hands trembling, and looked at Harry. Go, Ron whispered. Harry's throat tightened. Ron. Ron forced a grin. Tell my mom I died bravely. Stop saying that, Hermione choked. Ron lifted his chin like he was trying to become a person worth the story. The enemy queen slammed into him. Ron flew backward and hit the ground hard, unconscious. Harry's stomach twisted with fear and rage hot, fast. The knot surged, thrilled. Anger. Yes, use it. Harry's scar burned. Hermione grabbed Harry's arm, tears in her eyes. Harry, don't. Harry forced himself to breathe. My balance. He could feel how easy it would be to let rage become power and smash the board into rubble. He could feel how satisfying it would be. He could also feel the cost, Isfit sticking to him, making him easier to use. Harry swallowed the rage like poison and turned it into something steadier. A vow. I will bring him back, Harry whispered. Not as anger, as law. Then he and Hermione ran through the final door, leaving Ron behind with hope and terror tangled together. The mirror chamber, truth versus hunger. The last room was quiet. Too quiet. A table stood in the center, and on it rested a small, bright red stone that seemed to glow with its own heartbeat. The Philosopher's Stone. In the shadows near the far wall stood a mirror taller than a person, ornate, strange, inscribed with letters. Hermione slowed, breathing hard. We made it. Harry's scar prickled sharply. The knot was practically vibrating now, like a predator smelling blood. And then a voice came from behind them, soft and pleased. Well done. They whirled. Professor Quirrell stood in the doorway, pale, smiling. No estute, no trembling. His eyes were too bright, like something behind them was peeking out. Hermione's wand snapped up. Stay back. Quirrell chuckled. Ah, Miss Granger. Always enthusiastic. His gaze slid to Harry. And you, Mr. Potter. I confess, you're inconvenient. Harry's voice was steady. You want the stone? Quirrell nodded. Yes, and I want something else. Harry's scar burned. Quirrell's eyes gleamed. Your scar is a key. A perfect, beautiful latch. So old it sings to wards built before this school knew its own name. Hermione's voice shook. You're Voldemort. Quirrell smiled. A piece of him, he corrected softly. Enough. Harry's stomach turned. A Horcrux. Quirrell's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. You learned the word. The shadow behind him stirred, angered. Quirrell stepped forward slowly. Give me the stone, Harry, and I'll help you. Harry's scar burned like a brand. The knot surged. Help. Answers. Control. Quirrell's voice went gentle, hook gentle. You want to understand your scar? You want to be free of it? I can show you how. We are alike. Harry's jaw clenched. No, Harry whispered. Quirrell's eyes sharpened. Think, boy. They hid you in sand and ink. They taught you oaths and rules. But they didn't cut the knot out, did they? They couldn't. Harry's chest tightened. Quirrell smiled like he'd struck the bruise. I can. Hermione whispered, fierce, Harry, don't listen. Harry didn't answer Quirrell. He answered the room. He poured sand in a thin line across the floor between them, like a boundary. He traced one symbol. Truth. Then he spoke calmly, clearly like a judge. You can't cut it without breaking me, and you don't care if I break. Quirrell's smile faltered. The truth symbol pulsed faintly, and the air in the room clarified, stripping away some of the charm gloss around Quirrell's voice. Hermione gasped. His stutterets. A mask. Quirrell's eyes narrowed, annoyed. Clever, he hissed. Then he raised his wand. Wandcraft's fast blade lashed out in green light. Harry didn't match speed. He matched space. He slammed his palm down and traced refuse with his finger in midair. The air thickened. The spell hit his boundary and splintered sideways, scorching stone instead of flesh. Hermione screamed and fired her own spell-pure Hogwarts instinct. Quirrell flicked his wand and knocked it aside effortlessly. Child, he sneered. Harry felt rage surge hot, tempting. The knot purred. Harry forced breath. My. He reached under his shirt and pulled out the return seal. He slapped it against his own chest. It burned cold. A vow of escape, not victory. Quirrell's eyes widened. What? Harry didn't answer. He turned to the mirror. Because he understood now, Dumbledore had expected someone to reach this room. And Dumbledore had hidden the stone. Not behind wards. Behind intention. Harry stepped in front of the mirror of Ariste. His scar burned fiercely. The knot screamed, silently open, open, open. Hermione grabbed his sleeve. Harry. Harry stared at his reflection. He didn't see himself holding the stone. He saw something else. A small sanctuary by the Nile. Nefert cold eyes. Hori's heavy hand on his shoulder. Siaesic Quietsmide. He saw Ron laughing like an idiot and not dying. He saw Hermione's mind shining without fear. He saw himself whole. Not famous. Not powerful. Whole. And he wanted that more than he wanted revenge. More than he wanted to win. He wanted balance. The mirror shimmered. Harry felt something slide into his pocket, small, warm, heavy. The stone. Quirrell stepped forward, frantic. What did you do? Harry turned slowly, fingers closing around the stone through fabric. Hermione's eyes widened, realizing. You have it. Quirrell's face twisted with fury. Give it to me. Harry's voice was calm. No. Quirrell lunged. And then the shadow behind Quirrell Voldemort's fragment pushed hard, forcing Quirrell's body faster than it should move. Blade speed. Harry didn't flinch. He spoke a truth that was also a sentence. You are contamination. He slapped his palm against Quirrell's arm as Quirrell reached for him. Not a punch. Not violence. A measured touch, inked by intent. The air around Quirrell's skin screamed wrong, wrong, wrong as Maya recognized imbalance. Quirrell shrieked, skin blistering where Harry's hand touched. Harry stumbled back, shocked. Hermione screamed, Harry, your hand. Harry looked down. His palm was reddening, burning, but not from fire. From contact. Because the thing behind Quirrell was poison to law. Quirrell staggered, panting, eyes wild. Voldemort's voice, no longer pretending, hissed through him, cold and furious. You. Harry's scar burned like it might split his skull. The knot surged, responding. The room trembled. For a heartbeat, Harry felt the door behind his scar strain. The serpent wanted him to open. To rage. To break. Harry clenched his burning hand and forced the oath into his bones. Maya. Balance. No anger. He held the stone tighter in his pocket. Voldemort's presence pressed harder through Quirrell, desperate. Quirrell lunged again, grabbing Harry's sleeve. The contact burned Quirrell's skin like acid. Quirrell screamed louder. Harry stumbled, fighting to keep the stone hidden. Hermione fired a spell at Quirrell's wand, armed disarming, not lethal. It struck. Quirrell's wand clattered away. But Voldemort didn't need wandcraft. The shadow surged, and Harry's scar flared so hard he nearly blacked out. He felt it Voldemort trying to pull on the knot like a rope. Tried to use the scar to hook him. Harry's vision blurred. He tasted metal. He heard Nefert's voice like a blade in his memory. Do not offer anger. Harry dug his fingers into the ink and whispered through clenched teeth. I'm not your door. The words landed like a lock clicking. The knot resisted being pulled. The strain in Harry's scar eased just enough. Quirrell collapsed to his knees, shaking, skin blistering where Harry had touched him. Voldemort's presence screamed silent, furious, then recoiled like a serpent burned by fire. The room went still. For a moment, Harry stood shaking, holding the stone, hand burning, scar throbbing, but mind steady. He'd won if he could call it that. Not by blasting. Not by triumph. By refusing to be used. The adult world arrives late, as always. Footsteps thundered. The door slammed open. Professor Snape burst in first, robes billowing like a bat, eyes sweeping the scene. Quirrell on the floor, Harry and Hermione standing, the mirror looming. Snape's gaze locked onto Harry's burned hand, then to Quirrell's blistered arm. Snape's face tightened in something like realization. Potter, Snape snarled, what have you done? Harry's voice was rough. Stopped him. Snape's eyes flicked to the mirror. The stone. Before he could finish, Dumbledore entered calm, bright-eyed, but with urgency under it. His gaze took in the room. Then he looked at Harry. And for one heartbeat, Harry saw something raw in Dumbledore's face. Regret. Harry, Dumbledore said softly. Harry didn't answer, because the only truth in his throat was ugly. You left. Dumbledore's gaze dropped to Harry's pocket. He didn't ask. He already knew. Hermione's voice cracked. Professor Quirrell, he's Voldemort. Dumbledore sighed. Yes. Snape's eyes narrowed. I warned you. Dumbledore's gaze stayed on Harry. And you, my boy, you've done something very unusual. Harry's scar throbbed. The knot was silent, angry, contained. Harry's voice came out flat. I made an oath. Dumbledore blinked. An oath? Harry nodded, jaw tight. My. Snape's expression twisted, confused, and suspicious. What's he talking about? Dumbledore went very still. Because Dumbledore understood more than he liked showing. Dumbledore's voice was quiet. I see. Harry met his eyes. My scar is a key. Your castle recognizes it. Dumbledore's face softened with pain. Yes. Harry's throat tightened. Why? Dumbledore didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. Harry looked away. He felt suddenly exhausted. Like the walls inside him had held, but they were tired. Dumbledore stepped closer. Harry, you have been raised with a discipline I did not anticipate. Harry's voice was rough. You didn't anticipate me at all. Silence. Even Snape looked briefly uncomfortable, like someone had coughed during a funeral. Dumbledore's eyes saddened. I'm sorry. Harry's chest tightened. Kindness could be a hook too, Nefert had said. Harry didn't let the apology pull him into softness too fast. He said quietly, Ron is hurt. Hermione's face crumpled. He got hit by a chess piece. Dumbledore's expression sharpened. Bring him. Epilogue. A new weave. Harry woke in the hospital wing. His hand was bandaged. His scar still ached, but the ache felt contained, like the oath had tightened something in the knot's cage. Ron lay in the bed beside him, pale but breathing. Hermione sat between them, asleep in a chair with a book open on her lap like she'd fallen unconscious mid-sentence. Harry stared at the ceiling and listened to the quiet. Madame Pomfrey bustled around, muttering about reckless children. Dumbledore eventually came alone. He sat beside Harry's bed, hands folded, eyes gentle. "You did something remarkable," Dumbledore said softly. Harry didn't respond. Dumbledore sighed. "I hope Hogwarts would give you childhood." Harry's voice was hoarse. "It gave me locks." Dumbledore flinched faintly. Harry continued, steady. "Voldemort has Horcruxes." Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. "Yes." Harry stared at him. "How many?" Dumbledore didn't answer. Harry's scar prickled, faintly not listening. Harry pressed fingers to the ink. Dumbledore said quietly, "Too many." Harry swallowed. "I have a slate, a map of knots." Dumbledore's gaze flicked to Harry's trunk. "I suspected." Harry's voice was flat. "Then you suspected a lot." Dumbledore's shoulders sagged slightly. "Yes." Harry looked at him, voice quieter now. "I'm not your prophecy. I'm not your weapon." Dumbledore met his eyes. "No." Harry's throat tightened. "Then treat me like a person." Dumbledore's gaze softened. "I will try." Harry didn't say, "Trying isn't enough." He didn't need to. Dumbledore rose and moved toward the door. Before he left, he paused. "Harry," he said, voice gentle, "whatever you were raised to be, you are welcome here." Harry stared at the ceiling, then said quietly, "I was raised to keep doors closed." Dumbledore nodded slowly, as if that was the truest thing he'd heard all year. He left. Harry lay still, listening to the castle's distant creaks. He could feel Hogwarts around him, old, clever, layered with secrets. He could feel the knot behind his scar, silent, angry, contained. He could feel his oath heavy, steady, like a feather on a scale. And somewhere far away, beyond the castle and its politics, beyond wands and prophecies, the Nile waited. Not calling him home, just holding space for him. Because Harry Potter was no longer only Harry Potter. He was Ammonius Harry, hidden and protected, a bridge between old law and modern war. And now he knew the truth that would shape everything that came next. Voldemort wasn't a single enemy. He was a weave of anchors. And Harry's life, his power, his choices would decide whether that weave unraveled into balance or snapped into chaos.